What we hope to do is to carry on that, expand that area of radio. For instance, we are hoping, inshallah, within months to have a network on online radio station running permanently 24 hours a day on the internet. That's a wonderful opportunity. We also want to move across into the area of video. That has become the mainstream even on the internet. So we hope to have an area in the media hub which would cater for skills that are related to that area as well. So what we're looking to empower our youth, particularly in the areas of being able to produce programs, whether they are just for the radio or for television or for online TV, as you know, with regard to the YouTube channels that are available just now. So that is a beginning, and there is no limit to what we can do and how far we can move in that area.
Take this building as an opportunity to further the work of Young Muslims Glasgow, because currently we're doing open circles on a Friday, and we've got Hillhead High, Hillhead Primary, and Shawlands Academy and Wood Farm Education Centre. But if we can take this building and use it to progress further, we have ideas for projects like the Young Blue Dome Academy and iSyllabus for teenagers. And if we can take this building and use the resources that it'll give to us to help us further these projects, it would be an amazing thing.
Some Information Scotland does things like training facilities for different groups, service providers, for schools, and for sometimes the schools come in as well, and we have an exhibition for them to see. So there's different things like that. There are workshops as well, and we'll also provide materials like leaflets and posters for those who want to do something similar. The activities that the ARC would provide as far as the Islamic Information in Scotland is concerned would be things like Dawah training, drop-in sessions and coffee mornings, possibly extending the facilities of what we already have, and exhibitions and things like this, so that we can accommodate more people, and people who are interested in Islam, and people who, Muslims themselves, who actually feel perhaps a little bit daunted by going to different places. This will be an open doors place.
people wanting to give their time. Where do they go? What do they do? So Radio Ramadan becomes an exciting project for them. They're getting involved. They're obviously improving their employability and kind of their own creative skills. There's lots of areas that young people work in: research, editing, presenting is one that they love, being on air and talking about the different subjects that are important to them.
I think we've all grown up with Radio Ramadan, and I was asked to come in and just for a short period to do some admin, and I jumped at the chance because you feel that you want to give back something to the radio station that's given you so much. It's just such an amazing Gava project, the radio station, and you feel really privileged that you're helping somehow to get the broadcast out, and you're helping to raise all this money. So it's what's kept me hooked and kept me here.
Well, it's been a couple of years because I've been so busy, but I remember very vividly the first time I volunteered at Radio Ramadan, and it's just such a brilliant experience. You come in and I was working at the Muslim Youth Show, but I was doing Careers Corner, I think, and it's amazing the skills you learn when you're editing and you're recording and you're interviewing people, and people give you time to do these things, and all of a sudden you're interacting with uncles and aunties who you would never have thought of interacting with before, and it's just really a brilliant way to kind of springboard into the community and get to know people who you may have seen in passing, or you will see a lot more from then on.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अस्सलाम वालेकुम प्यारे सुनने वाले रेडियो रमजान ग्लासगो ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਮੇਜ਼ਬਾਨ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਜਾਵੇਦ ਗਿੱਲ ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਿਰਜ਼ਾ ਸਰਫਰਾਜ਼ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡਾ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਥ 2 ਵਜੇ ਤੱਕ ਰਹੇਗਾ
ਅੱਜ ਤਾਂ ਮਾਸ਼ਾਅੱਲਾ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਰੋਜ਼ਾ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਜੀ ਅੱਜ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ
ਅੱਜ 27 ਤਾਰੀਖ ਹੈ ਜੀ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਦੀ
27 ਤਾਰੀਖ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਦੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਖੈਰੀਅਤ ਨਾਲ ਹੋ ਠੀਕ ਠਾਕ ਹੋ
ਜੀ ਅਲਹਮਦੁਲਿਲਾ ਮਿਰਜ਼ਾ
ਸਾਹਿਬ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ
ਮੈਂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕਈ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਵॉलंटियर ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਔਰ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕਈ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੇਰਾ ਤਜਰਬਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਇਆ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦਾ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਸਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਿਊਸਰ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਪੇਸ਼ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਸੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟਰ ਵੀ ਰਿਹਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ FM ਜਾਂ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਇੱਕ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਮਕਸਦ ਸੀ ਔਰ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਦੇ ਮਹੀਨੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਮਾਲੂਮਾਤ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਜਾਣ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਤਰਬੀਅਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾਵੇ ਔਰ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਤੋਂ ਸਹੀ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਿਰਦਾਰ 'ਚ ਮੁਸਤਕਿਲ ਇੱਕ ਤਬਦੀਲੀ ਦਾ ਆਗਾਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome to the third annual Iqra Book Festival for 2022. My name is Sajid Qayyum, and I'm here representing the ARC Glasgow, and I'm just introducing the next few minutes before we go on to our amazing programs we put together by the team here. First, I'd like to say a great thank you for everyone who's put the festival together for the next 2 days. Firstly, for our sponsors, of Creative Scotland here in Scotland, and in partnership with Radio Ramadan and the ARC as well. And of course, the amazing team that's been working tirelessly for months and months on end. This kind of stuff doesn't happen just within a few days' notice. It's a lot of effort being put in by everybody here. So I join you and ask you to join together in your prayers for those who put this fantastic festival together. My name is Sajid Qayyum, one of the trustees of the ARC and Radio Ramadan in Glasgow, and I've been asked just to do a short introduction to the festival today. And I wanted to just very quickly bring you back, bring ourselves back to this organization that we have been privileged to be part of for the last 7 or 8 years, and in fact a bit longer than that if you've been involved with Radio Ramadan here in Glasgow. And we've had a number of values that we kind of try to stick to as part of the ARC. There's 8 values all together, including being accountable, being proactive, doing things of good quality, community development, sustainable, inclusive. But the 2 I wanted to focus on today was creative. Since we first broadcast in 1996, over 26 years ago, we were the first Scottish broadcaster catering for the minority ethnic community here in Scotland. And we've striven to remain creative in everything that we do, whether buying and converting the amazing building that serves as a permanent home for the media services the community needs, or indeed this very book festival itself. I'll come back to a little bit how I think that a book festival, although not in itself anything unique, this one I believe is very much so and very, very valuable. The second value is partnership. Iqra embodies that very sense of working with others to make something bigger and better by bringing in a wide variety of people, not including the amazing authors, some of whom are from a background of Islam and many others who are not, but also working with other partners. And I wanted to specifically mention a couple here, book club members, or book clubs that have become part of the festival. I'd like to say a very a welcome thank you to the Minority Woman English Language Conversation. That's the Minority Woman English Language Conversation WESREC group. And secondly, to the North Lanarkshire Muslim Women and Family Alliance group. And it's by working with partnerships, local community groups and partnerships like this, that the Iqra team have managed to put together a fantastic program for you for the next couple of days. And as I said to you before, coming back to the innovation side of it, the team here have put together an amazing number of offers that will be introduced to you over the next few hours and the next 2 days, in fact. They haven't just limited it to the theological aspect of the religion. As we've done for many years, whenever we talk about Muslim, we always think of the theology, we always think of the religion, the dogmatic aspects of the religion. But they've widened it out to a much wider sense of this wonderful religion that at the end of the day, this religion that actually inspires 2 billion people on this planet and around the world. And I think that's really, really important in terms of what Islam embodies, this way of life, not just the theological aspects, but the much wider sense of what it means to be part of this amazing way of life. And I hope today that you all who are listening are inspired by the amazing program that's been put together and the authors that will be coming on. Maybe next year, inshallah, God willing, we'll have the pleasure of meeting face to face, perhaps in the ARC itself. Let me not waste any more time. I'd like to introduce your main host for the day, my younger sister, as I call her, Sidra Ali. She's a biology and science teacher in secondary, and probably more significantly, anyway, I would say, a mum to Ismail, who is not just one, he's 1.5, I have to say. I have to make that very important. Those 6 months are very important. She's an avid reader herself and has followed the project from the grassroots and watched it grow over time. And she's been part of Radio Ramadan, like many of our youngsters from the age of 14, taking on various roles through the years and helping us get the radio station on air, quite frankly, is a very, very valuable member of the team. So I'd like to pass the baton on to the much younger and better team. Sidra, take it from me, inshallah.
Jazakallah, Sajid bhai, younger for sure, but older and wiser definitely have their place as well. And I'm just introducing the Iqra Book Festival. I'll be your host and I'll be with you the whole day, introducing the interviewees and the authors alike. And it's my pleasure, first of all, to introduce our first interviewee, Iqra Beg, who has a background in education, like myself, and has interest in writing pertaining towards human experience and emotion. Now, for those of you who are joining us, remember you can join us live on our RR365 Facebook page and our YouTube channel as well. Over to you, Iqra.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Sidra. I'll be interviewing today Noreen Huck, and Noreen Huck writes plays, short stories, flash fiction and poetry. She featured on BBC Radio 4 Women's Hour, reading her short story Rearranged, which was published in an anthology in 2020. The anthology was A Match Made in Heaven at Hope Road Publishing. Her poem Spare Room appeared in issue 3 of Zero Readers, an American literacy magazine, who recently nominated her for the Best of the Net award. Noreen's debut novel Light Once Lost won a place in the One More Chapter competition and was shortlisted for the Cheshire Novel Prize in 2022. This was also the year she was selected for Playwrights Studio Scotland's mentorship programme. So I'm going to pass on to Noreen, who's going to read an excerpt of her short story, Rearranged.
Assalamu alaikum, Iqra. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to start off from my short story, just a kind of a short extract from the beginning of it, and it's from the anthology A Match Made in Heaven, published by Hope Road. Okay. Sapna closed the front door and returned to the kitchen to resume her lunch. She opened her laptop and stared at the blank screen. She had wasted her life. She knew it. She had been married to Gazumfer for over 3 decades. It had been 30 years of bland indifference. Even on the day she accepted his proposal, she had suspected she would one day find herself telling the story of their engagement with a sigh. But her family wanted her to marry him, and that was the way things were. Not like now, when young people did as they pleased. She sighed and waited for her laptop to snap into life. She brought up the website, took a bite from her cheese and chaat masala sandwich, and typed in her login details. Username, 58 Jaffa Cakes. Password, the road not taken. And what had her parents based their decision on? Did they admire his wit? Were they impressed with his charisma, or recognise the traits of a kind, caring, selfless nature? No. He had the right job, was the right colour, sported the appropriate amount of facial hair. She was stabbing at the keyboard and had to force herself to stop and breathe out her frustration. Well, now there was no one left to disapprove. She typed out the words, "Yes, let's meet," and clicked send.
Okay, so I love that you chose that part of the story to read out. As a South Asian woman, I feel that many of us have either experienced something similar in our lives, or at least know somebody that has. So I'm just very interested to know why you chose to read this part of the story.
Yeah, well, I thought it was quite a neat kind of way to summarise the difference between the generations, really, because how it used to be, a lot stricter, and you couldn't really find your own marriage partner. The older generation, that's what they went through, and then nowadays, what it is now, really. So I mean, still traditionally, families find marriage partners, and it's through the community, and that still can be the case. And it does tend to save people from the pitfalls of of that whole going online, and it's a safe space to find prospective partners. But I was really interested in this whole idea of like what happens. I mean, nowadays it's becoming the case that link with the community is no longer there. Some people are more isolated. They don't have even those family connections that might introduce them to someone new. So what happens in that? And like nowadays, the main character here, Sapna, is, now trying her luck online with a kind of marriage website with some really awful results later on in the story. And like you said, it's a kind of familiar thing, isn't it? You always know. I mean, I've heard so many stories from people, really kind of hilarious stories, quite horrific, some of them as well, about, you know, the experiences of going through this process, and, you know, all the shocking demands and disgusting table manners and tea flying out of noses, and the prospective guys, like, you know, munching on pakoras noisily while quizzing them about their cooking abilities. You know, all that. It's a whole topic in itself. I could probably just write one story just about that.
No,
but, yeah, I wanted to kind of tease out those different ideas. Yeah.
No, definitely. I think one thing, if anyone's read the short story, which you obviously should, there's so many themes in it that are so relatable. And there was one sentence, and luckily it was in your excerpt as well, that I really wanted to focus on a little bit, or have you expand maybe. It was the one where Sapna says, well, now there was no one left to disapprove. So it's almost as though the sentence I got from it was like, she felt like she could now live her life as Catholic. So it was almost as if she was in limbo, maybe. But I'd love to hear, you know, what it was about that, why that sentence, why that phrase.
Yeah, because I mean, again, it shows that the difference between the generations. I mean, see, when, you know, the first generation of Pakistanis came to this country, right? It was, their natural focus was on, you know, they were economic migrants. It was about making a better life for their children. And because of that pressure, they didn't really have the kind of freedoms that we do to just focus on what they wanted. It was all about sacrifice and hard work. So yeah, I thought, yeah, it would be interesting then to follow the story of an older woman who was from that kind of background, from that life, who was then free from those constraints. Like, what happens then? What is she? I found it quite exciting, that journey of like, what is she now going to do now she's got that freedom? And that's the kind of impetus of the story that really made me want to go, oh, I want to follow this character and see what it is that she's kind of, what she decides or how she goes about, you know, making changes in her life, really.
Yeah, so that kind of falls on to the next question, which was how your personal experiences kind of informed your writing process, because the story that you've written is there's so many topics that have been explored within the South Asian community, and the taboos and things that we kind of have to deal with, but this is a very niche topic that you've picked. You know, it's like, you know, you get married and it's this idea, it's happily ever after, that's it, full stop, done. But what actually happens afterwards? And, you know, in Sapna's case, her husband's passed away. So then what? Now what? You know, his life stopped. But interestingly enough, it doesn't seem like it has for Sapna. So, yeah, your own experiences.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really based on any one specific experience. It's mainly on the kind of observations of things that, you know, of Pakistani culture, of people around me, of the way things are. And yeah, so it's interesting because in the story, she's come out of a long marriage, whereas obviously her husband's passed away, but she's got this feeling of guilt because she realizes, hold on, I was actually never really happy. You know, she's got time now to reflect over the years and like the way that she just kind of went with everything. And it was like,
yeah,
I never really asserted myself as a person, and that's something that's quite, that can, you know, that did happen a lot in the past and still does, unfortunately. But yeah, so it was that idea of I wanted to explore as well this idea of what is happiness really, like, you know, what gives you that happiness. And the main character in the story is, you know, she's materially very wealthy, right? It's that old cliche that money doesn't make
bathrooms, very wealthy.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, she's but yet she is really emotionally impoverished, right? So I suppose the story for me was kind of about this kind of rejection of materialism over, you know, the value of experience. So, you know, she's got the money, the big house, but yeah, she's not really living the way she wants to live her life. So it's kind of like an emotional rags to riches story, you know, and she's kind of, yeah, she's not got that happiness in her life until she then goes, I'm going to decide now to take action and change it. And that's, you know, what happens.
I think that's really interesting. Her taking action was her signing up to join a dating website. Now, I don't know about everyone watching, but for me, I was like, whoa, like you're an older woman, you've been married, you're now widowed, and, you know, I think even for the younger generation, some people can find it very difficult to join dating websites because they're scared of this or that, or just, so many obstacles in the way. But for an older woman to do that, I think it's crazy, but it was so refreshing. I think it's the first time I've ever read something similar, anything like that actually. But it was interesting watching her thought process as well, because she's joined this account, this website, and she's justifying all her choices. And she's like, you know what, well, it's not like I'm actually going to get married anyway. Look at my age, I'm not going to get married, I'll just try it or whatever. So although a lot of South Asians might be able to relate to this, I was wondering if you'd be able to explain this to people, to non-South Asians, to explain this concept and maybe why it's so shocking and so whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm going to be really that annoying pedantic person now. And it's not actually a dating website, it's actually a marriage website. But
a marriage, right? Yes, there's a difference there.
There is a difference.
But yes, okay, thank you for correcting me there.
I just don't want to get in trouble.
No,
no, but yeah. So again, but then the joke is that essentially it is almost the same, but really, halalified. It's when you don't, it's the whole idea is it's for marriage, right? And that's why people are looking. But essentially, when you look at it, isn't it just people meeting up outside in a way that is away from family? Now, I think a lot of the time, this is the thing I was really intrigued by, because in modern day society, we are coming away from community culture. It is all about the individual, and it's all and so people can be living lives that are quite isolated, that they maybe even don't identify a lot of their kind of the way they live their life with kind of Pakistani culture as much. And you see that through the generations diluting, even language, right? The way that people are they don't have as much Urdu as maybe the other generations that came before. So and I think so to explain that, I suppose it's quite hard, really. It's a bit baffling. I think I'd explain it with quite a bit of difficulty there, because I don't understand the fact that I think with older generations, that how strict their lives were, and it's completely separate from religion. It's the culture prescribed certain things that were way beyond what Islam prescribes. So, for example, getting divorced was such a rare thing. Not heard. I mean, if people were going to get divorced of that generation, they would just separate. So that was a huge thing for them to do. And so, like I said at the start, they didn't have those freedoms that we do. Everything was such a big deal. The level of judgment that existed then and still exists. There's still you still get a stigma related to these things, or marrying at an older age. After bereavement or whatever, so that even finding they couldn't find their own partner. How when you think about that now, right? You think, whoa, you met once and then you got married. Oh, okay.
Worked out for you,
and you can't figure it out. So it was just a completely different world, wasn't it? But also, I think that even people who are not from Pakistani cultures will understand a little, to a certain extent, because it's a lot. It's what really pins this idea down is ageism and also sexism, because it tends to be that judgment is on women more often than not, sadly. And that's those concepts are universal. That women are looked at as when you get beyond a certain age, you're past it. You don't have that value anymore, and that is sadly a universal concept. So, it's not just within our culture; these things are kind of pervasive in society.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that. A very good answer. One thing I kind of want to hold into is your the individualism. Can't speak English. Individualism aspect of, I think, the generation now. We are moving away from the collectivism, the everyone's together in the community kind of vibe. But what's interesting to me is that Sapna's personality in the story, it's almost like she's in conflict with two parts of herself. There's one part that's a strong widow. She's living on her own, and she's refusing to have her sister-in-law move in because her sister-in-law is, she's very suggestive. She's like, we'll live together and we'll be great. But she's very much like, no, I live on my own and I'm okay with it. But also, and she has the courage to kind of explore herself, hence why she's on the marriage website. that distinction. And yet she still seems quite terrified of being judged, and, you know, maybe even shunned for her modern thinking. So I think with Sapna's character, what is it that you were trying to portray or achieve with this duality?
So really that conflict within her. And I think that's quite normal. I mean, everyone has that within them. They're like, they've got certain, you know, they want to be braver in certain situations, or, you know, that way you think you do something or you say something or you meet some sort of problem in life, and later on you think, oh God, why didn't I say that? Or why didn't I do that? And it's that little voice in your head trying to kind of, I don't know, kind of get you to go out there and feel a little bit uncomfortable and be out your comfort zone. And so you're right, she has that within her, but also it's I think it really kind of, because obviously she's still got her sister-in-law, she's got, you know, a member of her husband's family who's kind of still close to her in a way. So I think that it's the idea of moving on, isn't it? The guilt in that. And I think women are especially skilled at guilt. We take guilt to another level.
A whole other level, definitely.
You know, and we really kind of inflict it on ourselves. So yeah, it's that idea of, you know, how can I move on from this? And then it's this idea of selfishness as well, because I wanted to explore that again. That's such a intergenerational thing. Like my own parents, right? When we finally convinced them to go out to eat, I can see them sitting there in a restaurant completely uncomfortable. And when the bill comes in, you're just like, the stress levels are like, we spend so much money on ourselves, it's such a waste. And even like convincing them to buy new things, they're like, you know, you know, put yourself first for once. And they're just not used to doing that. And it's just, you know, it's fun. They've lived their life in a way that's so it's actually amazing when you look at it, that level of self-sacrifice,
absolutely,
and what they've put themselves through, you know, for the sake of their kids and everything. And you're like, wow. And you think, God, I couldn't do that.
I know, absolutely.
Yeah. So again, I think it's about getting that balance, isn't it? Like, you know, and I think Sapna herself represents that idea of the person who's never put herself first, and then is trying to make that change. And I suppose it's the guilt of doing that.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting to watch her do it, because even though, again, she's guilty and she feels all those ways, one thing you said there was that we put it up, it's almost like we inflict it upon ourselves. And there's like a level of self-awareness in Sapna, that she's aware that she's lived her life in a way that she no longer wants to live. Like, she doesn't want to be in that bubble anymore, she wants to do something different. And that level of self-awareness is really interesting, because like we're saying, South Asian females, Pakistani females, can sometimes be very selfless. You know, they're expected to be very selfless, and so it's just interesting to watch her develop and reflect on herself. So I think what I'm trying to get at is that, although she was like, what made you want to talk about this woman that's going through all these things, but also is very much self-aware? She sees what she's doing, she sees the patterns now, and she wants to break them. What's the aim to show, like, you know, showcase a woman like this, a character like this?
Well, I think it's to show again that balance of what you need in life. You can't be completely like one way or you can't be completely selfish either. It's that it's kind of bridging that gap between the generations, and I think our positive points and our negative points, you know, and also to show that these women are individuals and they're unique, and they have a sense of humor, and they have an emotional life. And I always find that really, I think I was quite naive when I first wrote the story, and I thought it would, you know, the way it would be received. So what I mean by that is, I think when I got asked to go on to Radio 4 to speak about the story, that was such an eye-opener for me, because I remember, you know, when I was being interviewed about it, Jane Garvey was saying, I was really shocked, I was really surprised that this character is like this or is like that, and there's like kind of humor in it. And then there was an awkward pause, and it was almost like, and then she realized, but I shouldn't be surprised, should I? And I was like, no, you shouldn't. I mean, okay, we're brown women, we're Pakistani women, we may cover our heads, but we still have an IQ, we still have a personality. And absolutely, And it's the fact that that actually had to be spelled out was slightly painful to me, and I just thought, oh God, it was so depressing at that point. I thought, oh my God, really? Are we still here?
I think. Sorry, please.
Yeah, I'm just saying that there's, I've got so many kind of aunties in the community that are such huge characters, and they're such wonderful fun, and they have their own, it's just like the amazing kind of people. And that's at the end of the day, we're all people, and yet it's the way that judgments are made about, well, you're a brown woman, you cover your hair, oh, you poor soul. It's it's so reductive, and the kind of inherent discrimination within those judgments, it just comes out when you start to talk about them, and you kind of challenge that stereotype, isn't it?
No, definitely. And it's interesting because I think we feel the same within the community as well. So this is not just outside, like, although it may not be, oh, you cover your scarf, you're a poor soul, cover your scarf, good English and stuff, cover your hair and, poor soul, that type of thing. It's more so like you're an older woman and look, your life is over now, your husband's gone. And we have certain stereotypes and certain judgments towards these older people, older women. And I'm not going to lie, when I read the story, I was like, wow, this is crazy. I was like, this woman, I'm loving her, but I'm very surprised at what she's doing. And it was really interesting because I then had to really think about it and think about an adult, like an older female that I know, and I had to like kind of imagine, just to make it relatable, just to see how I felt, to see if I could sit with that, and how did it make me feel uncomfortable? Was I like, what? Whoa. And I think naturally you do, but that's why we have these conversations to death, don't we? Like, about our culture and our society and men and women and this and that. But the reason it's so important is so that we have people like yourself that, like, lovely stories like this that cultivate discussion. Because some things one thing that you said was that people don't talk about it, so they might be in the back of their head somewhere, but it never comes to the conscious. And by writing and doing that, that's what you've done. You've brought it to their conscious mind. They're aware of it. So that was really interesting, and also leads on to the next question. Mm-hmm. So you obviously spoke about. So I just want to know the response that you've gotten from your family and friends. You obviously mentioned the interview you were at, but from family and friends who read it, what was their response? How did they take it?
So I think the funny thing is, right, honestly, apart from my sister and my husband, I don't think anyone else has actually read the story. And the reason I think what happened was, at the time, so it was 2020 when the anthology was published, and things were really hectic at that point. So I came to writing like much later in life. I wasn't starting I didn't really go for it right, when I really wanted to, sadly, in childhood. I loved writing, but I did come to it later. And because of that, I felt, well, I need to give it my all and really go for it. And any kind of opportunity is going to come my way. That was the point. I thought, I'm going to say yes to everything and try and do everything, right? Which was kind of insane. But what happened because of that was just things were coming at me really quick and fast. I was constantly working on different things. I was furiously writing poetry, short stories, sending things off to this competition, that competition. And at that point, I think everyone was really supportive, but they couldn't really keep up. And I think I was overwhelmed at that point. So I think the reaction, even now, that I get when I say to them, like, oh, I'm writing this, or I'm working on that project, they're like, which one is this again? What are you doing? Like, it's that level of, like, I don't know what. No, it's not.
Okay, sure.
But we don't quite know.
So happy for you.
Yeah. So it's kind of a case of that. But and also, see, at that time, I think they knew I was writing, but they thought, oh, it's like a hobby. I don't think they realized how much it had taken over my life. So I remember just before the story came out, I was one of my I'd written a bit of a play, and it was being performed at Glasgow Women's Library at a kind of celebration event, and it was just like a really amazing experience. They had professional actors reading out scripts, and my mum came along to that, and I'll never forget her reaction. Was just amazing, because like I was watching her kind of watching it, and just the look on her face, right? And as the audience was reacting, like laughing to the jokes and stuff, and there's like a really special atmosphere that gets built up, when you've got an audience there listening live to words that you've written. It's just really quite intense. And so that, she was just taking all that, and at the end she just turned to me and she kind of had tears in her eyes. And she was looking at me with a shocked face. She's like, I knew you were writing, Noreen, but I didn't think it was anything like this. And I think for me personally, that was just such an amazing moment. But also, I think it wonderfully sums up what writing is like, you know, a writer's life, because you're sitting there and you're on your own in your room working, writing away for ages on your own, and then at some point, you know, something that you've written kind of goes a bit public, and it's that amazing but terrifying kind of vulnerable feeling of, oh God, right? What's the reaction? How are people going to, where's it going to land? How's it going to land after so long of working on it on your own? And so that was, it's quite intense, but wonderful. Anyway, so yeah, everyone's really supportive about Alhamdulillah. I have had a lot of support with the novel I'm writing, and my brother and my sister-in-law have like already read it, and they're like, okay, next book 2, please. What's the next one? I'm like, well, I've not written it yet. And they're like, so that's really nice. Yeah, and my husband's really fantastically supportive. He just does so much so that I can do the writing. And yeah, and he puts up with me being really boring about it, really, to be honest. Like constantly talk, oh, all right, I'm doing this, and this is what this is about. And he's like, right. So yeah.
No, that's really nice. It's always nice to hear people being supportive of your work. We have just a few more minutes left, so I have 2 things I want to do. One is, you said you are writing a novel. You finished?
Yes. Yep. So I started in 2020. Yes. And finished earlier the year.
Sorry, I froze and I thought it was me, but it just.
Oh right.
Please continue.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So it got shortlisted for a competition, the Cheshire Novel Prize. So and that was just such a phenomenal experience. Like so much came out of that, and I've met so many different amazing kind of writers. So I'm kind of connected to kind of I'm still in contact with the shortlisters there, and they're amazing. They're just such wonderful writers and such an amazing support, really good friends. So it's I think every experience I've had throughout ever since I kind of did a course at Glasgow Women's Library, which is fabulous as well. If you've never been, go there.
Yes, definitely.
It's an amazing place. But ever since I went there, and just every single experience since has just put me in contact with amazing people, and really helped me develop as a writer and develop my confidence as well through each stage. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. Well, thank you so much for this interview. We do have one question.
Okay, great.
From the audience, and it is: do you think because women have become more independent, it's hard to find a partner?
Oh, that's quite there's a lot in there, isn't there? Right.
You have 2 minutes, so on you go.
Oh, 2 minutes. Okay, so right. Well, there's maybe yes and no. It depends on what's expected, really. Like, you know, I think nowadays marriage is seen to be more of a partnership, which is kind of in a very positive way. Like, you know, you're kind of partners in the house and out and working, right? There are still people who are of the mindset that no, I want my wife to be in the house. There are still people who have that traditional mindset, and you know, and I suppose as someone who is more independent, who is working, they might not be the best option for them. But it's about finding that balance, isn't it? And who, you know, and who you connect with. And I think really importantly is knowing yourself first of all. And I think that's the kind of key message in the story, is that you can't be happy in any relationship unless you have self-knowledge. And it's that journey to that which is so valuable. So yeah, I think if you're independent, you can still I think it's still possible. You can still find a partner. You just need to find the right person, and to do that, to know who you are and what you want in life.
I think that's a great answer. No, I think I personally think that's a great answer. Self-awareness, I think, is the first step for anything. But thank you so much for allowing me to interview today. The short story is amazing. The more I read it, the more things I was like, this is so interesting, this is so fascinating. So if you haven't read it, please do go and read Noreen Huck's Rearranged. It's an anthology, A Match Made in Heaven. But I think I'm going to pass to Sidra now. She's here and waiting. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Iqra Book Festival. For those of you who have been tuned in with us, that was Iqra Beg delving deeper into Noreen Huck's book, which was giving us a little bit of an insight into the value of experience and emotional well-being. Stay with us. Our next session starts at 1:45 promptly. Those of you who would like to watch it live, please do tune in on the RR365 Facebook page or the YouTube channel, and we will be back with you shortly.
Young people wanting to give their time, where do they go, what do they do? So Radio Ramadan becomes an exciting project for them. They're getting involved. They're obviously improving their employability and kind of their own creative skills. There's lots of areas that young people work in: research, editing, presenting is one that they love, being on air and talking about the different subjects that are important to them. I think we've all grown up with Radio Ramadan, and I was asked to come in and just for a short period to do some admin, and I jumped at the chance because you feel that you want to give back something to the radio station that's given you so much. It's just such an amazing Dava project, the radio station, and you feel really privileged that you're helping somehow to get the broadcast out, and you're helping to raise all this money. So it's what's kept me hooked and kept me here. Well, it's been a couple of years because I've been so busy, but I remember very vividly the first time I volunteered at Radio Ramadan, and it's just such a brilliant experience to come in and, like, I was working at the Muslim Youth Show, but I was doing Careers Corner, I think, and it's amazing the skills you learn when you're editing and you're recording and you're interviewing people, and people give you time to do these things, and all of a sudden you're interacting with like uncles and aunties who you would never have thought of interacting with before, and it's just really a brilliant way to kind of springboard into the community and like get to know people who you may have seen in passing or you will see a lot more of from then on.
I was a volunteer at Radio Ramadan in my early teens, and it was quite a unique experience, especially for a schoolboy to be able to edit together current affairs programs, children's programs, even being able to live mix some of the debates. And I'd go into school with a bit of a sense of achievement and be able to talk to my classmates and tell them, look, you can tune on this particular frequency and you can actually hear anywhere in Glasgow the fruits of my labor, the actual work I've been producing. And it was also an opportunity to make those mistakes. It was that you can't make when you're working on an international level, broadcasting to tens of millions of people in a community radio environment. It's a bit more flexible and you can get away with that. So when I look back to Radio Ramadan, I look at it with a sense of thankfulness, a sense of loyalty. And whenever anybody calls me up from Radio Ramadan and asks me, can you help us to get in contact with so-and-so, I'll always try and honor that request, whereas other people may not necessarily get the same sort of treatment.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अस्सलाम वालेकुम प्यारे सुनने वाले रेडियो रमजान ग्लासगो ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਮੇਜ਼ਬਾਨ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਜਾਵੇਦ ਗਿੱਲ ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਿਰਜ਼ਾ ਸਰਫਰਾਜ਼ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡਾ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਥ 2 ਵਜੇ ਤੱਕ ਰਹੇਗਾ
ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਮਾਸ਼ਾਅੱਲਾ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਰੋਜ਼ਾ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਜੀ ਅੱਜ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ
ਅੱਜ 27 ਤਾਰੀਖ ਹੈ ਜੀ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਦੀ
27 ਤਾਰੀਖ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਦੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਖੈਰੀਅਤ ਨਾਲ ਹੋ ਠੀਕ ਠਾਕ ਹੋ
ਜੀ ਅਲਹਮਦੁਲਿਲਾ ਮਿਰਜ਼ਾ
ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ
ਮੈਂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕਈ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਵੋਲੰਟੀਅਰ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਔਰ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕਈ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੇਰਾ ਤਜਰਬਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਇਆ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦਾ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਸਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਿਊਸਰ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਪੇਸ਼ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਸੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟਰ ਵੀ ਰਿਹਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ FM ਜਾਂ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਇੱਕ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਮਕਸਦ ਸੀ ਔਰ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਦੇ ਮਹੀਨੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਮਾਲੂਮਾਤ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਜਾਣ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਤਰਬੀਅਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾਵੇ ਔਰ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਤੋਂ ਸਹੀ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਿਰਦਾਰ 'ਚ ਮੁਸਤਕਿਲ ਇੱਕ ਤਬਦੀਲੀ ਦਾ ਆਗਾਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the Iqra Book Festival. If you're just joining us, you can tune in live on our broadcast on the RR365 Facebook page or the YouTube channel. Next up, we are going to hear from interviewee Safina Mazhar, who is the author of the series of 4 under the pen name SF Mazhar. I hope you have your cups of tea ready, because after the first interview, I realised you're in for a treat.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So thank you so much for that, Sidra. First, I want to say good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Thank you for joining us today at the Iqra Book Festival 2022. I have the honor of being in conversation with Hilal Ashraf. So just a very quick bio about Hilal before we jump into conversation. Hilal Ashraf is a Malaysian writer who is very active in writing works involving elements of Islam. Hilal is also an active and freelance speaker who runs Islamic camps and motivational workshops. So we're going to be speaking to him about all of his kind of writing, but in particular, we're going to speak to him about his work, Nirnama. So Nirnama's bio, little blurb reads as, an unnamed warrior has earned the renown of many. Tales of his courage and compassion of helping the oppressed in fighting Jagat Sukhi's cruelty has spread across the Malaya Peninsula. Yet his name remains a mystery. Hence they call him Nirnama, the nameless one. Follow Nirnama in his quest to uphold justice, packed with thrilling action and heart-pounding suspense. So that sounds absolutely amazing. I had the privilege of reading the first few chapters of Nirnama. Absolutely astounding work, Hilal. So welcome, Hilal. Tell us a little bit about yourself in your own words.
Assalamu alaikum. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Yes. Thank you for inviting me on this program. And first and foremost, I must say sorry, because English is not my first language, and I'm not really fluent speaking English, but I'll try my best for today, inshallah. My name Hilal, Muhammad Hilal Ashraf bin Abdul Razak, because Malay love long name. So I have 3 names, Muhammad Hilal Ashraf, but I put Hilal Ashraf as my name at my books. And I've wrote many books on non-fiction and fiction, actually. Now total around 50 titles, alhamdulillah, from 2009, since 2009 until now. And now I've built my own business, self-publishing house, Hilal Ashraf Resources, on Malaysia. In Malaysia, resources mean enterprise business. So self-publishing house, and focusing on publish my own works only, and focus on fiction only now, inshallah. Now I have self-published around 30 titles, alhamdulillah.
Wow,
Since
that's
2016.
amazing. That's amazing, Halal. Wow. So we'll hopefully, inshallah, go into more conversation about this. But I was hoping that you would be able to share a little bit of your writing with us today.
Can you repeat?
Yeah,
I did
of
not
course.
hear well.
So just 5 minutes of a little bit of a reading from maybe the book Nirnama.
Okay. So I will read my novel Nirnama. This is my latest novel, Nirnama. Nirnama actually is a Malay word. First, I thought about it from a Malay perspective, because Nir, N-I-R in Malay means not with, without, mean without. So Nama and A-M-A in Malay means name. So nirnama means without name, no name or nameless. But after I published nirnama, then I write nirnama on Google. I found that nirnama also come from Sanskrit word, Sanskrit language, and it also means nameless.
Wow.
So I'm amazed by it.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's great how it all works out.
And actually, Malay language have influence by Sanskrit language actually. One of it influence lah. Another is Arabic and English and Chinese and also lah. And another. So I will read a bit from my novel Nirnama, but in English version for everyone to hear now, inshallah.
That's lovely. Thank you.
All right. Okay. So I take one scene when early scene when a villain come to a village to school and kill this one teenager, and Nirnama come to help. So sorry for my lah, because in Malay we used to add lah at our end of speech.
That's
so,
okay.
I sorry lah. All right. So I start from. Okay, I start from here. Okay. This time it would seem Sang Kancil's craftiness had indeed spelled his doom. Oh, but Sir Bagak, you are the one who wanted to be entertained with magic tricks. So I obliged. The only problem was, you gentlemen weren't entertained at all. Because that wasn't entertainment, you fool. It was humiliation. You dare use name of Jagat Suci to make mockery of us. Well, that's entertainment, and I'm entertained. 1, 2, 3 dance, boys and girls both got banned. Sang Kancil roared into laughter. How on earth did you think I was the great Jagat Suci himself, disguised as a charming boy? You should have seen how you all marched in tune to my every command. Did you all just realize what happened long after I left the palace? To hell with you, foolish whelp. Bagak Durjana lifts the barbed cudgel high above. The people of Medini gasped in terror, shocked that Sang Kancil would meet his end in mere moments. Here's death sentence for you, boy, declared Durjana, with cudgel swung forcefully. Right before cudgel could reach its target, a sudden gust of wind struck, blinding all in the area. Uncertainty on what befell Sang Kancil rose in their minds, swelling as large as the billowing cloud of dust now enveloping the scene. Still, all present compete for the front row, wanting to witness the boy's final moments. Bagak Durjana too sensed something was amiss. The cloud has not settled, but he could feel his weapon not connecting where it should, as if halted mid-swing. He only felt the rush of the swing reaching the earth. Nirnama, you are really here. The voice of Sang Kancil rang through the dust. The wind soon receded, revealing a man average in frame, yet beheld a warrior's countenance. One of the man's hands was holding his cudgel in place. A thrust from his unsheathed kris impaled it, preventing the weapon from harming Sang Kancil. So kris is a weapon, a Malay weapon. Okay. It's an asymmetrical dagger with characteristic blade design created by alternating iron and Nicholas iron lamination. Okay. Okay. The wind soon receded, shock crossed both Bhagat Durjana and his henchmen's faces. Bhagat Durjana was far from what one would deem a weakling, and his tribe had been teeming with power. Yet the situation stupefied him nonetheless. It was inconceivable for the warrior in his comparably modest frame to stop the attack, let alone single-handedly. You were true to your word, color me impressed, said the warrior, looking at Sang Kancil, a thin line etched across his lips. The boy chuckled. Told you I could get Bhagat Durjana out of his palace. What is the meaning of this? Bhagat Durjana demanded, his brow furrowing. Insulted, he immediately lifted his cudgel to prepare his next strike. But for his weapon refused to budge. His brow furrowed even more. To him, the man was clearly channeling some sort of energy into his courage that impaled the cudgel. So that the scene when Nirnama intervened to help Sang Kancil, a boy that have made a joke about Bhagat Durjana, the villain, on this scene. Okay, so Bhagat Durjana was mad and go out from his palace and try to kill Sang Kancil in his village. But
because he made
Nirnama intervened.
All because he made a joke about him? My goodness.
Yes, but actually there is some backstory about it.
Okay.
Actually, Nirnama is the one who taunted Sang Kancil to make joke about Bhagat Durjana, so that Bhagat Durjana will leave his palace, and then Nirnama friends, he had friends, one of the good guys, another team of good guys called Semuta Putih will come to Bhagat Durjana Palace and invade and conquer the territory.
Right,
yes,
right.
like that.
A very, very clever and very kind of calculated hero you've written there, Hilal.
Yes. I try to be have some mystery and complete readers must think a little bit.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that brings me to my first question then.
Okay.
So obviously looking at what you've kind of explained about the character, and you've said you like to have a little bit of mystery in there, you like to have the readers really having to sort of work along with the story. So can I ask, how did you sort of create the characters to be like that? What was your process of creating characters that are so clever, so calculating, and obviously your story is a fantasy story, so one of the kind of questions that fantasy authors are asked all the time is, how did you come up with the world that your characters kind of live in? So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, so I'm focusing on Nirnama, but as in general, actually my process is the same. For creating my characters, I've always influenced by first I've influenced by Sirah Nabawiyah, our Prophet, our Rasulullah SAW, and his great companions all have great characteristic actually, and I love to source my inspiration from them, get my inspiration from them. But at the same time, I love feed myself fiction. I love to watch movies. I love to watch anime, animation. I love to read manga, and I love to read cartoon, DC comics, Marvel comics. I read all of it.
I see.
And I am influenced with Hong Kong comic. We call it manhwa.
Okay.
So if Japan comic, manga, Hong Kong comic, we call it manhwa. And focusing on Nirnama, actually, I get the idea from one of the comic from Hong Kong called Feng Wan, written by Ma Wing-shing. Okay, his name, he is Chinese lah, from Hong Kong. From Hong Kong, okay. Great artist, Ma Wing-shing, very legendary. So one of his character in Feng Wan meaning cloud and wind, wind and cloud. So it's about a warrior, okay, a Chinese warrior. So one of the character in the story, in one of a prominent character in the story, is nameless, called nameless. His name is nameless. In Chinese, they call it Wu Ming. Wu Ming means nameless. Okay.
Okay.
So I really intrigued by the character, and I said I want to do the same for Malay version. But I do not want to call it nameless because the comic has translated to Malay, and it called tanpa nama, straight translation, nameless, tanpa nama, without name.
Without name.
So I cannot use tanpa nama. So I searched how to spell nameless without using tanpa nama in Malay.
Right.
That's why I found the word nir, meaning without. So I use it because in Malay we have a popular song from our popular artist named Siti Nurhaliza. If you heard about her, very amazing woman, Siti Nurhaliza. So one of her song used one word called nirmala. Nirmala, mala means in Malay, mala means you know, we'll have something bad on your face. So
like
nirmala without bad lah, without.
So like a flaw, you mean, like a
flaw, yeah.
Right.
Without flaw. Nirmala means without flaw.
Okay.
So I said I can create a new word. I think I thought it's a new word lah at that time. So I said, so I named my character Nirnama.
Nirnama. Very interesting. That's very interesting. And also, I was going to ask you.
That is an example. That is an example of my process. I like to think like that. I like to search. I like to take actually old idea. I like to innovate upon the idea that already existed. So I like to innovate upon that.
I see.
Like my if people read my story, actually I have many of my story built upon the story of Sahaba, the story of Prophet. Like I have one of my series called Hikayat Satra Sejati, the story, the tale of warriors, the tale of pious warriors in English.
Okay.
So I built upon the story of Musa when he left the Fir'aun palace and then become prophet, right? So my character on that story, he left the palace because his father, the king, is bad, is really evil. And he became a warrior that defend the society lah, the people. So I like to build upon existed idea and try to make it more interesting, more not more interesting, but to try to add something new, something from another perspective and whatnot.
That's very interesting. It's very, very interesting, Halal. Because my next question to you was going to be what inspires you to write, but I think you've already answered that. So I think as well as the religion of Islam, and of course our Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and his Sahaba Ikram. As well as that, you've mentioned manga, you've mentioned comic books and everything. So I think you've answered that question really well. So thank you for that.
I always say that only dead people have no inspiration.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because as long as we live, as long as we feed ourselves with information, with knowledge, we will always open to inspire.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's lovely, Hilal. So can I ask, what made you choose the genre of fantasy fiction? So all of your stories you've mentioned, and especially Nirnama, is obviously based in a kind of a fantasy universe. So what made you choose fantasy?
Actually, my first attempt on being a published writer in Malaysia at my age of 18, I wrote a novel first. I wrote fiction first, but at that time I wrote realistic fiction. I wrote about a team of volleyball player that want to be first place at their country, at their state. Yeah. That I have been inspired my real life experience, because I am volleyball player when I'm at secondary school. So I use my already experience that I've already experienced. I build upon it to make a novel. So that is my first experience to enter the writer's world as a novelist. But at the same time, I am an author of many articles, non-fiction articles, because I am a student of religion. I come from religious school, Islamic school. So we have read many books of Sirah, Hadith, Al-Quran. So I always reflect myself with Al-Quran, with Hadith, with Sirah Nabawiyah, and then I love to write. So at my early journey as a writer, I'm not dedicated to one genre. I write whatever I want to write, as long as it feels that I'm doing da'wah, you know.
Oh, that's brilliant, Hilal.
I'm spreading the message. At that time, I feel like that. I feel like
absolutely.
That. So until one day, until one day, I realized, because as writer in Malaysia, we have Kuala Lumpur International Book Fair every year in KL. So as writer, after I graduate from Jordan, because I start writing before I go to university, and then I go to university in Jordan at Yarmouk University. Then after I graduate, I start participating on Kuala Lumpur International Book Fair. And every year, I've seen youngsters from primary school, from secondary school, from universities, young generation, every year have flocking the fiction booth. Fiction book of fiction, like comic, like novel. And I know that all of that fiction stories, the majority of it, not really representing Islam. You know, not uphold the message of Islam and whatnot. So I feel that I must do something. I must focus on my journey as writer. That I must bring something because I treat my work as a amal that I want to present in front of Allah at Yaumul Qiyamah, inshallah. I hope I can do that, inshallah. So I feel that I want to focus on fiction, and have youngsters, young generation love to read my work, because they when we as a teenager we love fiction. I once a teenager, right? I love to read comic. I love to watch movies. I love to read about stories. So I think I want to make great stories that uphold the Islamic message, bring out the Islamic teachings, but on with great stories that make them not only happy, but get great message of Islam, inshallah.
Inshallah,
So
absolutely.
that's why I choose fiction.
That's why you choose fiction. That is an absolutely brilliant reason to choose fiction, Halal. So thank you so much for that answer.
And,
can I ask, obviously?
Okay.
Sorry.
Can I add something?
Of course.
And one thing, when I focusing on fiction, I've seen that with fiction we can expand our territory, not only on novel, but we can adapt my novel to comics. We can adapt it to a film, to animation. So I think is more potential to it. We can adapt it to build a game. So now we see that those territories not presenting Islam with the right representation, right? Now,
absolutely.
So I want to build fiction world that representing Islam the right way, inshallah.
Inshallah, inshallah. That is amazing, and I wish you the best of luck with that as well. And I will definitely be picking up some of your work to read, inshallah. So that's lovely. Now, just focusing on Nirnama, can you tell us how long did it take you to write that book? So this is from not just the physical writing, but the idea coming to you, the concept, creating the characters, and then having that kind of final product. How long did that take you?
With Nirnama, it takes 3 months to write.
Okay.
But to publish it, I take around 8 to 9 months, because with Nirnama come with illustration, a lot of illustration, and I pay a freelancer. I paid a freelancer to
I see.
draw the illustration.
Right.
So we have many.
Oh, brilliant! That is gorgeous artwork.
Yeah.
Do you always use the same freelancer for graphic
Oh,
design?
no. Actually, with Nirnama is the first time I collaborated with her. Actually, that because I have bigger vision with fiction. I've just got bigger vision with fiction arena of fiction.
Okay.
Because before that, I just think about it as writing only, books only, novel only. But since I thought about it, it can be expanded to be a film, to be comics. So I've decided to invest and collaborated with artists that can deliver my story, that can paint my story and bring vision.
Oh, that's one. So you use, is it like a kind of a panel of artists that you use, or do you?
No, it's only one person. Her name is Hani. We call she call herself Nenek Hani, granny.
Oh, okay.
On media social, but she is
okay.
young. She is from young generation.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. Fantastic. And just obviously, when you read your kind of story to us as well, it's obviously in the English version. So you wrote the original books in Malaysian, yeah, in Malay.
Yes.
So what was the translation process like for you? So seeing your work translated into English, was there anything that needed to be cut? Did the things have to be kind of reworded? Was there anything that couldn't be directly translated? What was that process like?
We try to not use direct translation.
Okay.
So the one who do the translation is my friend. His name is Mohaimin Misrai. He is the editor at the International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies, IAIS in Malaysia. So he's better, far better English in English than me.
Okay. Okay.
So he doing the translation, inshallah.
Okay.
And he explained to me that the translation will not be direct translation because we will not want the people to feel like it Google Translate. So it will be on his creativity to add the flair. But we still want to stick with Malay style of speaking, and many Malay and Arabic words we we make it stay on the manuscript. Yes.
Right. Okay.
And we give a footnote like Chris. We don't translate Chris. We do not translate it to dagger, but we maintain it as Chris. So we give a little bit footnote about what is Chris, like I read.
That's brilliant. Yeah, so that means that your readers will then pick up a little bit of that language as well, then, because they're reading words in the authentic language.
I actually inspired by, you know, Disney film Raya the Last Dragon. Raya the Last Dragon tried to represent element from Nusantara, our archipelago, Malay archipelago, but it feel English.
Okay.
So I want to make our reader feel like they are in our culture, and Malay culture and Islamic religion is actually very close, very intertwined. So we want to bring that also.
Absolutely.
But we will see in Minama also how the people twist the religion to their benefit only. Like our rulers try to claim they are Allah's shadow. They are representing God. So we in Ninama we criticize that. We bring it up like that. So when people read, they will feel our culture and our representation, our reality on this land, inshallah.
That's wonderful.
Why in illustration 2, you see the clothes, all of it maintain the our culture representation more true than Raya.
That's brilliant, because that's, as a reader, that's what you want to do. You want to kind of immerse yourself into the author's world and what they created, and it's so important to represent your culture and in your writing as well. So that's fantastic, Halal. Can you tell us kind of what advice do you have for aspiring writers? You've been writing since you were 18 years old. You've written a whole broad range of different genres. So what advice do you have to those who are maybe just starting out writing? What would be the one kind of important thing you'd like to say to them?
For me, my actually not advice, because I'm not really the knowledgeable on this field, but my sharing, my experience sharing will be seek your niche. Don't be afraid to try something new. Don't be afraid of criticism.
Very important.
Invite it instead, because with criticism, you will be improving. You know what you do wrong, what you do right. Actually, come from criticism also. Keep being better, keep improving, keep reading, keep writing, find a bigger purpose that will drive you far, that will keep you moving forward on this field. Because
very sound advice.
I've seen many people that want to be author, want to be novelist, just because they want to be rich. They want money. But money just get you so far. You must have vision bigger than money. Not that money not important, but money is the tool to get wealth. Money is not wealth itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. Some very wise words from you, Halal. And just before we finish up,
come from Akala.
Oh, does it? Okay. Last kind of question from myself is, what are your future writing plans? So, what are do you have anything else that you're planning to release soon? Anything you're working on currently?
For now, I want to expand Nirnama's universe to be trilogy. And now we try to translate it, and we see the exception of international community. I hope it successful. But now in Malay version, I try to make it a trilogy and have several spin-off of it, because Nirnama is my most successful works, at least now lah. And at the same time, I'm working on new title, a futuristic post-apocalypse story. So I want to go far beyond the future. I want to explore. Now people talk about metaverse, people talk about AI, people talk about Mars. So I want to integrate all of that advancements in my novel, but I want to write post-apocalypse. That after all of that achievement, and what happened to humanity?
So how far in the future are you thinking, Halal?
Maybe after we conquer Mars.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Well,
because Nirnama is classical scene. So I want to have my work to take on future after this, inshallah.
After this. No, that sounds really interesting. So we've got another 2 books to follow, Nirnama, to look forward to, and then a post-apocalyptic world set way in the future. So that's absolutely fantastic. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, Halal. Thank you so much for joining us, especially looking at the kind of time difference in Malaysia as well. So I absolutely appreciate.
Thank you for having me. And I'm very sorry because my English not really.
No, please
fluent.
don't be. You've been absolutely fantastic.
But I want to share something.
Please go for it.
Actually, I've fall in love with something from UK, from your place.
Okay.
I heard a lot Loki and Akala, right? If you know about them. So I actually very feel UK is an interesting place, inshallah.
Oh, it is. And I hope that you will visit very soon as well.
Inshallah.
It's been a pleasure speaking to you, Halal. Thank you so much. I'm just going to pass it back to Sidra, and thank you for everyone who's been listening in. And I hope you enjoyed the rest of the Iqra Book Festival 2022. Thank you.
Thank you to Halal and Safina. That was a fantastic exchange, reminding us that stories and books open your eyes and minds to the realities and beauties of life through another's perspective. Please join us back at 2:30, where I will have the pleasure of introducing or reintroducing Medina Tenor Whiteman, who has joined us again. She's been a previous part of Iqra Book Festival as well. For those of you who are listening online, please do get involved and ask us questions in our Q&A box, so we can ask the authors as well. And I will join you very shortly.
What we're doing just just now is in the area of radio. And what we hope to do is to carry on that, expand that area of radio. For instance, we are hoping, inshallah, within months to have a network on online radio station running permanently 24 hours a day on the internet. That's a wonderful opportunity. We also want to move across into the area of video. That has become the mainstream even on the internet. So we hope to have an area in the media hub which would cater for skills that are related to that area as well. So what we're looking to empower our youth, particularly in the areas of being able to produce programs, whether they are just for the radio or for television or for online TV, as you know, with regard to the YouTube channels that are available just now. So that is a beginning, and there is no limit to what we can do and how far we can move in that area.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to IBF Iqra Book Festival 2022. If you are joining us, you can join us live on RR365 Facebook page or the YouTube channel as well. I now have the pleasure of introducing Medina Thanur Whiteman, who has joined us again and who joined us previously in the first IBF. Medina is based in Granada, Spain. And she also features in her own blog named Cave Mum.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Can you see me okay? Can you see me and hear me okay? Just checking that anyone can see me. Hello. Sidra, can you see me? Okay.
I can see you, yes.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that I was actually visible before going on. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome back. It's a great pleasure for me to be here at the 2022 Iqra Book Festival, and especially my pleasure to be able to interview one of my literary heroines. She's really one of my favorite writers, Layla Abu Layla. So I have many questions for Layla, and we will have time for a quick Q&A at the end. So do put your questions in the Q&A chat box. First off, I'm going to read a little bio for anyone who isn't familiar with Layla's work. Sorry, I'm a little bit groggy today. Bear with me. Leila Abu Leila was born in Cairo, grew up in Khartoum, and moved in her mid-20s to Aberdeen. She is the author of 5 novels. There's another one on its way in spring, which I'll be asking Leila about in just a bit. Her most recent one was Bird Summons. Also, there's The Kindness of Enemies, Minaret, and Lyrics Alley. She is the fiction winner of the Scottish Book Awards, and her work has received critical recognition and high profile for its distinctive exploration of migration and Islamic spirituality. She was the first winner of the Kane Prize for African Writing, and her story collection, Elsewhere Home, won the Saltire Fiction Book of the Year award. Leila's work has been translated into 15 languages, and she was longlisted 3 times for the prestigious Orange Prize. Her plays, The Insider, The Mystic Life, and others were broadcast on BBC Radio, and she is the honorary president of the Society for the Study of Sudan and a fellow of the RSA. So without any further ado, welcome Leila. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, Medina. Thank you for this introduction, and salam alaikum everybody who's here this afternoon.
How are you today?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Happy to talk to you. You look very, behind you is like celestial background.
Yes, I'm tuning in live from the North Pole. No, not really. I'm tuning in from a very bizarrely warm Spain in October. It's not meant to be this warm. So first of all, I wanted to ask, what drew you to writing in the first place? Because as I understand it, you trained in the sciences, is that right?
Yes, I studied statistics in Sudan, and I came to the UK, actually, to the London School of Economics to do postgraduate work in statistics. But then my husband got a job in Aberdeen, and so we came here to Aberdeen with small children. And so I started to feel very homesick for Sudan and kind of like out of place. And also at this time, it was 1990, it was the first of this like anti-Arab sentiment in the media following the first Gulf War. And so you had people in the street shouting at you, Saddam Hussein and things like that. So it kind of made me feel that I wanted to have things to say or express, and I've always loved reading, so I started to write, and so it kind of took off from there.
How interesting. Was there anybody in particular who encouraged you in your craft?
Well, my husband encouraged me. The first time he read a short story I had written, he was like, I can't believe you wrote this. And so I was very happy.
And you sent it off to a publisher or to a magazine? How did it work?
Well, I started going to creative writing classes, and then once I was there, everybody was very encouraging, and then they told me you have to send your stuff out. So I started sending to small Scottish literary magazines, and then I got accepted, and then one thing led to the other, and then I found an agent, and then I published my first novel, The Translator. Yeah.
How amazing, mashallah. It's for any up-and-coming writer, and I would love to, even though I am published in various things, I'm not, my first love was novels, and I always felt that that's what I really wanted to do, but it feels so daunting. So it's lovely to hear your story, because it does give a little glimmers of hope in some way, that there's a way, there is a path, but I'm going to ask you more about that later on. Sure. One of the things I particularly admire about your work, and I'm sorry if I get a bit fangirly here, is the way you present Muslim women's stories so effortlessly. It doesn't seem that they're beholden to cliches or polemics, and any, just thorny questions, they seem to just come up in a very organic way, and it's very heartening to read this as a Muslim woman. It gives this tremendous sense of being seen and heard. Before I ask anything more about that, would you like to give us a short reading from Bird Summons to give listeners an idea of what I'm talking about?
Sure. So maybe I could just start from the beginning then, and then I don't have to explain what the book is about. Okay. She had hired a coach. Then when the women started pulling out after the anger over the photo, a minibus. Then when the numbers fell sort of still further, a people carrier. Then when there was just the 3 of them, Selma decided to take her own car. She had fought a battle and lost. The next time the Arabic-speaking Muslim women's group held their annual election, she would be voted out and someone else would be in charge. She had misjudged the situation. How was I meant to know that the grave had been defaced? This was a lame defense. If her rivals in the group could find a news article and post it to the group chat, Selma hadn't done her research properly. But even if she had known, it wouldn't have deterred her. It certainly wasn't deterring her now. She still wanted to go and offer her respects. She still believed in the purpose of the visit, to honor Lady Evelyn Covebold, the first British woman to perform the pilgrimage to Mecca, to educate themselves about the history of Islam in Britain, to integrate better by following the example of those who are of this soil and of their faith, those for whom this island was an inherited rather than adopted home. Selma's determination stemmed from her recent restlessness. Ever since her last birthday, time seemed to be snagging. She would put her foot forward and find herself still in the same place, as if she was about to stumble. More than once, she found herself wondering, can I last till the end without giving up or making a fool of myself? In her argument to the Arabic-speaking Muslim women's group, she said, we might never understand what it's like to be the eldest daughter of the 7th Earl of Dunmore, or to have a townhouse in Mayfair and a 15,000-acre estate in the Highlands. But Lady Evelyn was a woman like us, a wife and a grandmother. She worshipped as we worship, though she kept her own culture, wore Edwardian fashion, shot deer and left instructions for bagpipes to be played at her funeral. She is the mother of Scottish Islam, and we need her as our role model. So this is how the novel starts.
It's such an incredible premise. And I wanted to ask you, how did you walk us through the process of developing this idea? It's a very unique idea, first of all, integrating these different Muslim women's stories from history, from different parts of the world. There's a Sudanese character, there's an Egyptian character, and a Syrian character. And on top of that, you have somehow managed to thread through it references to Fariduddin Attar's Conference of the Birds. Is that right?
Yes.
How did you develop this unique concatenation of ideas?
Well, there's, as you said, there's 3 women. There's Salma, the one I read about. She's the one who's Egyptian. And then she had, and there's Moni, her friend, Sudanese friend, and Iman. So the 3 of them end up going on this trip. And on the way, they stay in this converted monastery. So they stay in a cottage in the grounds of this converted monastery, and this is where they start to kind of experience weird kind of things, and strange things start to happen to them. And I know when we spoke, you said you wanted something a little bit for me to read some of the surreal parts. So this is when this is the first time that that Iman, who is the youngest, this is the first time that she encounters the hoopoe bird. Okay. So later, lying in her narrow bed underneath the open window, Iman could see the night sky. It would never be completely dark. They were too far north for that. Instead, pink twilight glowed over the western horizon. There were clouds that looked round and full like candy cloths, and ones that were as flat as milk stains. Low streaks of light touched the ground, as if there would never be a deep, dark night. In the east, there was a crescent, low, orange, and perfect. The stars were distant, much more distant than she could remember seeing before. Her ears caught the sound of wings, a rustle of movement, sounds that were at first gentle but then became distinct. Through the window, a shy creature hesitated, asked permission to come in and speak to her. I am dreaming, she thought. I am dreaming, and this is a good dream. The creature was a bird, but it belonged to the night. The creature could be a bat, but it had feathers. It spoke a language that she could understand. It knew her from long ago. It had traveled with her all those miles, never left her side, was always there, but only here in this special place could it make itself known. Yet it was not entirely visible. Not exactly, for when she looked at it directly, it disappeared. She had to pretend she was looking in another direction, or at something else, for the orange, black, and white to materialize again. But this was not a problem. Iman wanted to listen to it and talk to it more than she wanted to look at it. The creature had a name, hoopoe, it said, named after the bird in the Quran. You are too big for a hoopoe, said Iman. You are fat. She was not afraid to tease it. And then, and then the hoopoe starts to speak to her and tell her stories, and and so we have this kind of like magical element entering the story, while at the same time the three women, they're quarreling with each other, they have issues, and then they're going all the way to visit this graveside in the Highlands. Yeah.
It's so cool. It kind of brings in a slightly sort of fantastical element, but yet it's somehow in keeping with the reference to Sufi poetry in some ways. It's almost like a kind of natural mysticism, because not only are they following this path, this bird is sort of showing them into this mountain landscape, they're also almost leaving behind their ordinary selves, their urban selves, their homes, their marriages and divorces, and all of these different things that are kind of sort of less important all of a sudden. And it feels very symbolic. It feels like you've done a very unique thing to me. I don't know if there's other books out there like this, bridging the realism of their lives with this very symbolic journey, almost like the hero's journey, but it's women. And that's something very special to me. I wanted to ask, how much were you conscious of wanting to represent Muslim women, or is this something that just emerged really naturally out of who you are and the way that you're writing?
It emerged naturally. I mean, I first had this image that came to my head of these three women in the car, and one of them was putting petrol in the car, and there was someone next to her and someone behind her, and I could see them very vividly. And so I started to think, well, the one who's driving must be kind of like the leader. The one sitting next to her would be the one closer to her. The one sitting in the back, maybe she's not so keen on this trip. And so it kind of started to go from that first image of the three women in the car. And then came the other things. Like the last thing actually was the Lady Evelyn. It's amazing because I wrote the whole first draft, and it had the hupu, and it had the monastery, and it had all of these things. But then when I submitted it to my publishers, they felt that why are these women together? Why are they in this journey? It like they didn't have a purpose to it. And so so when it came to the second draft, then I added in the Lady Evelyn as a kind of a focus. So then the whole journey then had a focus. So it was almost like I had a lot of vegetables and kebab in the dish, and then Lady Evelyn was like a skewer, and then she kind of like put all of these things together, and it kind of then the novel was fitted in all together. Yeah,
that is such an interesting metaphor to you, but it does feel somehow appropriate, because it seems like there's a lot of layers of metaphor in this story, which is one reason I really loved it, and I wanted to go back and read it again. Was it a bit of a departure for you to take it in this slightly more magical realism direction? Is this something that you're going to pursue?
It's a departure, and I'm not pursuing it for the time being, but it almost felt that the kind of writing I did before was very much like the realistic, the problems of the women and the kind of practical day-to-day life. But because this one, they were away from the city. As soon as I got them out of the city, and they were away from the mosque, and they were away from their husbands and from their children. So, and they were going up, and this idea of them going up in the highlands, it kind of all started to feel a bit like mystical, and so I wanted to kind of like explore that more. And so that kind of like one thing led to the other.
It's really beautiful, mashallah. You can tell you have a lot of writerly skill to be able to balance all these different things and weave them together so beautifully. Was it something that the Muslims who read the book, Muslim readers got? I mean, is this something that how was it received?
Well, it was received. I think a lot of one of the nicest comments I got, from a Muslim reader, was saying that that this is like the best representations she's ever read of Muslim women. That they seem so real. These women, they're practicing women. And then another comment was that there's no cliches. That these women are presented. There's not as a type. So these were three, usually when people do these novels where they have three friends, you'd have, oh, this is the type who's like this, and this is the type who's like that. But these women are not types. They're like, they're ordinary people, and they're facing the kind of challenges that the Muslim woman would face. I mean, one of them, she's happily married, but she's contacted by her old fiance, and so she starts texting him, and she feels guilty about that. And one of them is arguing with her husband about their son. She's got the disabled son, and the husband isn't relating well to the son, and he wants to move to Saudi Arabia and she wants to stay in the UK, and so she's got this conflict with her husband. And then Iman is this young girl who doesn't really have a career, and she's beautiful, but she's being kind of, her beauty is not working on her side. So some of these issues I just wanted to kind of like explore, and so it was nice to do that. Yeah.
It sounds like so much fun. You make it sound so appealing. I want to write more now.
It is great fun, and I love the research. I mean, once I had the Hoopy, I wanted him to tell stories. So the stories that he tells are from Rumi, traditional Islamic mysticism, but he also tells Scottish folkloric stories.
That's wonderful.
And so that was good. And then some of the other readers, you're asking about Muslim readers, but some Christian readers saw the echoes of the Pilgrim's Progress in it. They had,
interesting.
Yeah, and it was certainly one of the texts that I had read. So they saw that in it, and I think they liked it too, because the women were in a monastery. Some of the memories regarded the priests who had been living in the monastery. So there is a lot of Christianity in it as well. And one of the points I was making was that by us Muslims coming to Britain, we're coming to a place where there was a religion similar to our religion. Christianity in medieval times was very similar to Islam now. And I wanted to make this connection. And I think a lot of Muslims don't see this connection. They see themselves as being very different, and having no connection to the history of Britain. But we do have this connection because there were believers on this island who worshipped like we worship now. Yeah,
it's a really amazing way to overcome this sense of polarity or polarization that it does seem to be emerging in the UK, in Europe, in many places, the US especially. But it seems to be something that is very concerning for Muslims probably anywhere, but British Muslims. And what I really love about this is that it's as much a Muslim novel as it is a Scottish one. It's one that seems very related to the earth, and it has this feeling that you don't have to choose, you don't have to be one or the other. There is this space in which it all kind of merges, and it's fine. We don't have to be too stressed and overthink it. And obviously, we do have to think about it, and it's interesting to explore it, the history of it, but to have readers go into this imaginatively, I feel like it's a very interesting way to let people's defenses down. Would you say that's something that attracted you to writing?
Oh yes, I mean that you can kind of like be yourself in the writing, and when I write, I don't look over my shoulder. I'm not sitting here thinking, oh, what's X, Y, and Z going to think of this? What are they going to think of me? I'm not that kind of person. I just want to write the truth and put it out there. But what you said about the land, and I think it's one of the things I read and I found it very interesting was that Islam was the first religion in which people could worship anywhere. Like we weren't, previous religions always were related to a temple. People could only worship in a temple or in a church. But in Islam, the whole world is our prayer mat in a way. So these women, when they're part of what they're doing is that they're praying in places where it's very unlikely that another Muslim had prayed there before. They're reading Quran, and they're kind of connecting with nature in that way, which is it's a lovely experience for anybody who
Oh yeah.
you know, do come to the Highlands, come and visit Lady Evelyn.
You've made me very curious about her. I knew about her before, but now I hadn't thought of actually going to visit her grave, and now that's going to be on my to visit list, whatever you call it, not the TBR, not the to be read, the to be visited. I really, really like this point that you make about how Islam was the first religion where, you know, the whole world is your mosque. And I'm noticing more and more that there is almost a kind of an attraction or a resurgence towards a very sort of intuitive kind of Islam. And I almost wonder if this is like a reclamation of that, or a way of sort of signaling that this is also just part of Islam, that, you know, it's a very natural path. Would you say?
Yeah, I mean, this is what, you know, we there's all the political quarrels, and there's all this thing, but what is keeping us going? And I've been in this country for, you know, almost 30 years, is the worship. I mean, it's Muslims worshiping that is keeping us basically Muslims. I mean, the time of year when Muslims get the most attention, and it's very nice and it's very positive, it's in Ramadan when we're fasting, and that's what gives the good impression. Nothing else we do is you know, compares with that. So I feel that you know, that's one of the things that that comes through with, or I try and get it to come through with the book, this idea of worship, and of worshiping anywhere. You know, it's not that they're on holiday, they're no longer praying. They are, you know, they are of course
woven
continuing to pray.
seamlessly.
Yes. Yeah.
SubhanAllah. I'm really fascinated by the way that you seem to manage to weave very seamlessly, very effortlessly, spiritual themes into your writing. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel didactic. It does feel like it's just emerging out of, that's naturally what the story wants to say. I'm very curious though as to how you've managed to, it feels to me, one thing that I really admire, again, sorry, apologies for the fangirling, is that you know, you've really broken through you've made it in the sort of broader literary world, which it feels like it's a huge achievement as a Muslim. Am I just exaggerating here? I mean, is the literary world actually much more open to us than I'm thinking? Because I feel like there's some kind of bias or white gaze that we have to contend with.
I think it's open if we approach it from an organic position rather than answering back. I think if you're defensive, then you've already put yourself in a corner, that you're always answering back, that you're always being defensive, that you're always saying, oh, you know, but this, but that. But it's better just to come across with something, you know, something fresh, something that is, you know, that don't, instead of you know, clashing or you know, always explaining and defending, and, you know, it's better just to come up with something that is you know, and saying, well, this is how it is, take it or leave it. And people respond to the sincerity of that. You've been muted.
Oh yes, I'm back. Sorry, I muted myself because
yes.
I had a coughing fit. I didn't want anyone to have to suffer through that. Thank you. That's a really, really brilliant answer, and I'm taking notes here. I hope everybody else at home is taking notes, because I think this is a really important point, and just to try and learn how to be ourselves and to inhabit that without always being on the defensive and being on the back foot. I think that's a really tremendous, not only is it a great way of living, it's also a great kind of dawah, because it means that it takes all that pressure off. It takes the fight out of it and the polemic out of it. And I think that's what's really interesting about your writing. You really get that sense that it's not that the polemics aren't there, but they're there in a way that is, one approaches quite naturally, as if you're having a conversation with a friend. and things just come up and you discuss it and you look at the different sides, and then sometimes you come to some kind of conclusion about it, and sometimes you don't, and some things are maybe left a little bit unanswered and hanging there, which is just like life, really. So that's, in a way, even with the symbolic and the mystical qualities of your writing, it still remains very realistic, which is something I admire a lot. I apologize, my voice is getting a little bit disastrous, but I'm gonna battle on. I'm also really really happy to see African women portrayed in your writing. I feel this is a particular group that often gets neglected and erased from the picture. I get the feeling that you'll say that this is something that came very naturally, because it feels that you write just the way that you feel like writing. But how much have you been aware of this, the power of this representation?
Well, I mean, I'm Sudanese. I grew up in Sudan, so I feel African. You know, I'm comfortable with my African identity. So it's natural to write in that way, to write about the kind of women who, you know, are my friends or I grew up with. It kind of all goes together, I suppose. Yeah.
Mashallah. To go back a little bit to the polemics that I mentioned before, could you speak to the challenges of writing about Muslims behaving badly? So I feel your writing is very honest and it's very compassionate, especially with this regard, is just to show that it depicts the humanity of Muslims, not as being perfect people, as being pious, as being, you know, believers, as being worshippers, and having practices, but not assuming that this makes them somehow saints. And this is a very interesting feature of our literary world as Muslims, because I think a lot of us are used to books sort of portraying the saints and, you know, teachers and masters and people, prophets, of course, people who have achieved, transcended a lot of these icky human questions. But is this something that you feel should be developed more? Do you feel Muslims are ready for this? You feel people are embracing this?
Well, it's more fun to write about characters who have flaws,
right?
and it doesn't work really having saintly people in novels. It makes them kind of like wooden and kind of two-dimensional. But what I wouldn't do, for example, is that I wouldn't normalize what is haram. I wouldn't you know, glorify things that are haram. I wouldn't make it like a good thing. I would have it, I would show it, but I wouldn't really be you know, making it sound like that's normal, that's okay. No, it's not okay. I mean, you can have someone doing something haram, but then at the same time you're showing that it's not okay. You can have the two things together. And then that would work.
Right. Yeah, and that's actually a really interesting arena. I mean, fiction is a great way for people to vicariously experience things and see what can possibly go wrong, right? I mean, it's an imaginative, exploratory sphere. Did you have to have any discussions with your agent or your publisher about how you portrayed Islam?
No, I never did. Not for a second. No. This was never ever an issue. I don't even think about Islam as being something I portray as being a separate thing. I just think of it as all being together. It's just all part of the characters, and the character, they have a race, they have a socioeconomic position, they have a job, they have and then of course they have a faith and a degree of practice. So it all, for me, it all comes together. It's not like a separate thing that I plonk onto the work.
And connected to that, what would you say, what do you think about the social responsibility of writers? Because there is a sort of a question about writing, you know, art for art's sake, and art shouldn't have to care about its effects in the world. But my feeling is always that writers have a tremendous power, because you have these willing listeners, willing readers who are sort of captive, and they're you know, imbibing the messages that you're giving them. Yeah, what would you say about that?
I think it's a complicated situation, because obviously I wouldn't want the writer to feel that they're being censored or that they're being told don't do this or say this or don't say this. And I don't think that that's it's not a good situation to be in. And in some circles, they do believe that the literature is just, writing is just like dream. It's like a dream. So if dreams are not, you're not accountable for your dream, therefore you're not accountable for your imagination, therefore you can write whatever. So this is a point of view. But as I said before, in my, that's just me speaking. I wouldn't. I'm careful not to normalize what is haram. So even though if my whatever my characters do and they're not perfect, I wouldn't really go that far.
It's so interesting talking with you. I wish we could just sort of chat with a cup of tea. It's almost surreal to be doing this through Zoom.
Inshallah, one day.
Inshallah, one day soon. Before we go to Q&A, and I invite anybody who's listening to drop their questions in the chat box, could you tell us a little bit about your new novel, which is out in spring?
Yes, it's coming out, inshallah, in March 2023. It's called River Spirit. And it's set in the 19th century Sudan. It's a kind of like a historical novel. And what happened interestingly at that time is that a man in Sudan, a religious man, or someone who people respected and thought well of, he had a dream in which the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told him that he was the Mahdi, that he was the expected Mahdi. And so he galvanized the Sudanese into a revolution against the authorities, which at the time happened to be the Muslim Turkish Egyptian authorities. Of course, he wasn't the Mahdi, the expected Mahdi that's mentioned in the hadith. And so the ulama at the time, the ulama in Khartoum, knew that he was not, figured it out. They tested him and they realized that he wasn't the real person. But the population followed him and said that the ulama are just, government. They're just government scholars. They're just towing the government line. And so it was a time of unrest, and it was a very disastrous time. And it ended up with the British invading Sudan, and Sudan becoming a British colony. So it's this historical background. I tell this history through characters, through a love story, through the through the characters who are part of this. One of them is a young girl, one of them is a soldier, one of them is one of the ulama himself. And to me, this was quite a big challenge to write from the point of view of a man who's been educated in the Azhar, who's a sheikh, but he's young though, but so that's been quite exciting for me. But I did a lot of research, and it was great fun. So I hope people enjoy it.
Well, that sounds fascinating, and I'm so envious of the research element. That sounds like such a juicy time period to be researching all these different interlocking, that's not the right word, overlapping elements of colonization and religion and religious revival. And then on top of that, you're bringing in a very human story, again, of love stories. And this is what makes your work so, mashallah, so special. We have a couple of questions.
Sure.
First of all, do you see yourself in terms of an African Muslim or British or Scottish Muslim, or maybe none of these?
Well, probably all of these. And Sudanese as well, I guess. I guess because it's true that I'm using not only because of who I am, but because of I'm using all of this in the writing. I'm bringing all of these things in together, and I move within this circle. This is where my interest lies. Yeah.
Mashallah. I have a question from a friend who is a Canadian Sudanese writer, and she says hi.
Hi.
She asks, could you tell us a bit about the process of getting published as a Muslim, and what kind of supports do you envision for the future?
Well, I think there's lots of support because publishers now are looking for more diverse writers, and so there's a lot of opportunities out there where the publishers are looking for diverse voices. They're interested in minority communities. They're interested in and just widening what is out there. I think the important thing is to write well. It's not, don't get so bogged down with worrying about it being you're a Muslim or not a Muslim. Just focus on improving your craft. Writing better, reading more, joining maybe doing a degree or joining a writing group. I think that's probably the right way to go. Yeah.
Mhm. Wonderful, very good. Well, another question was, what advice would you have for would-be writers?
Well, that goes the same way, that in improving your skill, reading good fiction, because writing is an extension of reading. Getting a degree or getting doing a writing course, going on a writing retreat, and looking out for opportunities for mentoring, looking out for there's lots that you can do to improve yourself. There's books on how to write, how to improve your writing. There's also all these things that are available. Yeah.
Wonderful. I wanted to ask you very quickly as well about your plays. And now I have to say, I haven't heard, I'm guessing these are radio plays. I haven't actually heard them. I would love to track them down somewhere. Is there a way of tracking them down online?
No, that's the problem with the radio plays. Once they're broadcast, to get repeated, they have to pay all the actors, and it's all complicated. So that's why they kind of disappear. Of course, I can publish the script, and I've done that in some cases, but it's very difficult to get to listen to a broadcast. Yeah.
Would you say there's anything special that you would add to your advice about writing specific to plays and scripts?
To plays. Well, again, you have to, because writing is an extension of reading. So if you want to write plays, you have to read a lot of scripts, or listen to a lot of radio plays, or go and attend theater plays, or watch plays on TV. And you can get hold of scripts. Some are published and available. And then sometimes like there'll be also courses on script writing, specific courses on script writing. That's something also that's worth pursuing.
Is this something that you do, by the way? Do you offer courses like master classes and things like this?
Sometimes, yeah. Once in a while, I do get asked by an organization to do a class for them, and then I do a class. So I have been. I've done that in the past. Yes.
That's very good to know, because I would totally hire you.
Sure. So just follow me on Facebook or Instagram, and I always put, if I'm doing something, I would post about it, and then people can sign up.
And in person and online, or both?
Both, yeah, both. Yeah, both, yeah.
That's wonderful.
So, yeah,
did you feel, this is another really random question, but did you feel that the pandemic influenced the way that you wrote?
Oh, I loved it in terms of writing, because it was just so, I could focus for days and days, weeks and weeks. I never had that. There was always be like I'd travel, or there would be some kind of a disruption. So just getting the time to do it was really great. So I wrote the first draft of River Spirit in the pandemic. So it was really enjoyable. Yeah.
I have a friend who's she's been asking me, she's based in Australia. She says she's got 10 years of journals. She wants to turn them into a book, but she's waiting for waiting for the opportunity to take a month off and go to the outback and rent a cabin. And I was like, is it really necessary to do that? Is there a way to create that kind of cabin, like a virtual sort of cabin in your life, without taking that month off?
Well, that was the pandemic, wasn't it? I mean,
right.
The thing with going to retreats work for people like you're talking about your friend. for me, it doesn't really work because I get distracted by the place. I mean, if I was in a cabin in the middle of the desert, I'd be like, oh, the desert, oh, I'm scared. What if something happens? I'll be just so distracted. I wouldn't feel comfortable enough to write. Yeah, so.
Oh, we have one very last question from Nadine Patti. Would you come down to Glasgow to do a workshop if we ever have an in-person Iqra Book Festival?
Sure, inshallah, inshallah. I look forward to doing that. Yes.
Inshallah, and I'll be there. I think that's all the time we have now. So thank you so much. This has been such an insightful and fun, enjoyable interview. And inshallah, we speak again soon.
Inshallah.
I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the festival. Thank you so much for inviting me to be an interviewer, and take care. All the best.
Okay, all the best to you too, Medina. Bye-bye. Bye.
Welcome back to IBF. Those of you who have been with us all day, that was Medina and Layla. Layla, who has been the fiction winner of the Scottish Book Awards, and it was a very interesting interchange between Medina and Layla as well. It ranged from talking about Layla's book to barriers around publishing and how Layla potentially identifies herself as well as a writer, as well as a person. Those of you who are joining us live can join us on the RR365 Facebook page or the YouTube channel. Inshallah, we are going to go to a quick break, and I will shortly update you on the next session.
Young people wanting to give their time, where do they go, what do they do? So Radio Ramadan becomes an exciting project for them. They're getting involved, they're obviously improving their employability and kind of their own creative skills. There's lots of areas that young people work in: research, editing, presenting is one that they love, being on air and talking about the different subjects that are important to them. I think we've all grown up with Radio Ramadan, and I was asked to come in and just for a short period to do some admin, and I jumped at the chance because you feel that you want to give back something to the radio station that's given you so much. It's just such an amazing Gava project, the radio station, and you feel really privileged that you're helping somehow to get the broadcast out, and you're helping to raise all this money. So it's what's kept me hooked and kept me here.
Well, it's been a couple of years because I've been so busy, but I remember very vividly the first time I volunteered at Radio Ramadan, and it's just such a brilliant experience. You come in and I was working at the Miss Meath show, but I was doing Careers Corner, I think, and it's amazing the skills you learn when you're editing and you're recording and you're interviewing people, and people give you time to do these things, and all of a sudden you're interacting with uncles and aunties who you would never have thought of interacting with before, and it's just really a brilliant way to kind of springboard into the community and get to know people who you may have seen in passing, or you will see a lot more from them.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अस्सलाम वालेकुम प्यारे सुनने वाले रेडियो रमजान ग्लासगो ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਮੇਜ਼ਬਾਨ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਜਾਵੇਦ ਗਿੱਲ ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਿਰਜ਼ਾ ਸਰਫਰਾਜ਼ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡਾ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਥ 2 ਵਜੇ ਤੱਕ ਰਹੇਗਾ
ਅੱਜ ਤਾਂ ਮਾਸ਼ਾਅੱਲਾ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਰੋਜ਼ਾ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਜੀ ਅੱਜ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ
ਅੱਜ 27 ਤਾਰੀਖ ਹੈ ਜੀ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਦੀ
27 ਤਾਰੀਖ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਦੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਖੈਰੀਅਤ ਨਾਲ ਹੋ ਠੀਕ ਠਾਕ ਹੋ
ਜੀ ਅਲਹਮਦੁਲਿਲਾ ਮਿਰਜ਼ਾ
ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ
ਮੈਂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕਈ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਵੋਲੰਟੀਅਰ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਔਰ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕਈ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੇਰਾ ਤਜਰਬਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਇਆ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦਾ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਸਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਿਊਸਰ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਪੇਸ਼ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਸੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟਰ ਵੀ ਰਿਹਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ FM ਜਾਂ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਇੱਕ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਮਕਸਦ ਸੀ ਔਰ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਦੇ ਮਹੀਨੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਮਾਲੂਮਾਤ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਜਾਣ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਤਰਬੀਅਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾਵੇ ਔਰ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਤੋਂ ਸਹੀ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਿਰਦਾਰ 'ਚ ਮੁਸਤਕਿਲ ਇੱਕ ਤਬਦੀਲੀ ਦਾ ਆਗਾਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ
I was a volunteer at Radio Ramadan in my early teens, and it was quite a unique experience, especially for a schoolboy, to be able to edit together current affairs programs, children's programs, even being able to live mix some of the debates. And I'd go into school with a bit of a sense of achievement and be able to talk to my classmates and tell them, look, you can tune on this particular frequency and you can actually hear anywhere in Glasgow the fruits of my labor, the actual work I've been producing. And it was also an opportunity to make those mistakes. It was that you can't make when you're working on an international level, broadcasting to tens of millions of people in a community radio environment. It's a bit more flexible and you can get away with that. So when I look back to Radio Ramadan, I look at it with sense of thankfulness, a sense of loyalty. And whenever anybody calls me up from Radio Ramadan and asks me, can you help us to get in contact with so and so, I'll always try and honor that request, whereas other people may not necessarily get the same sort of treatment.
What we're doing just now is in the area of radio, and what we hope to do is to carry on that, expand that area of radio. For instance, we are hoping, inshallah, within months to have a network on online radio station permanently 24 hours a day on the internet. That's a wonderful opportunity. We also want to move across into the area of video. That has become the mainstream even on the internet. So we hope to have an area in the media hub which would cater for skills that are related to that area as well. So what we're looking to empower our youth, particularly in the areas of being able to produce programs, whether they are just for the radio or for television or for online TV, as you know, with regard to the YouTube channels that are available just now. So that is a beginning, and there is no limit to what we can do and how far we can move on the area.
I hope to take this building as an opportunity to further the work of Young Muslims Glasgow, because currently we're doing open circles on a Friday, and we've got Hillhead High, Hillhead Primary, and Shawlands Academy and Wood Farm Education Centre. But if we can take this building and use that to progress further, we have ideas for projects like the Young Leaders Academy and iSyllabus for teenagers. And if we can take this building and use the resources that it'll give to us to help us further these projects, it would be an amazing thing.
Some Information Scotland does things like training facilities for different groups, service providers, for schools, and for sometimes the schools come in as well, and we have an exhibition for them to see. So there's different things like that. There are workshops as well, and we'll also provide materials like leaflets and posters for those who want to do something similar. The activities that the ARC would provide as far as the Some Information in Scotland is concerned would be things like Dawah training, drop-in sessions and coffee mornings, possibly extending the facilities of what we already have, and exhibitions and things like this, so that we can accommodate more people, and people who are interested in Islam, and people Muslims themselves, who actually feel perhaps a little bit daunted by going to different places. This will be an open doors place.
Young people wanting to give their time, where do they go, what do they do? So Radio Ramadan becomes an exciting project for them. They're getting involved, they're obviously improving their employability and kind of their own creative skills. There's lots of areas that young people work in: research, editing, presenting is one that they love, being on air and talking about the different subjects that are important to them. I think we've all grown up with Radio Ramadan, and I was asked to come in and just for a short period to do some admin, and I jumped at the chance because you feel that you want to give back something to the radio station that's given you so much. It's just such an amazing Dawah project, the radio station, and you feel really privileged that you're helping somehow to get the broadcast out, and you're helping to raise all this money. So it's what's kept me hooked and kept me here. Well, it's been a couple of years because I've been so busy, but I remember very vividly the first time I volunteered at Radio Ramadan, and it's just such a brilliant experience. You come in and, like, I was working at the Miss Meath show, but I was doing Careers Corner, I think, it's amazing the skills you learn when you're editing and you're recording and you're interviewing people and people give you time to do these things, and all of a sudden you're interacting with like uncles and aunties who you would never have thought of interacting with before, and it's just really a brilliant way to kind of springboard into the community and like get to know people who you may have seen in passing or you will see a lot more from them on.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अस्सलाम वालेकुम प्यारे सुनने वाले रेडियो रमजान ग्लासगो ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਮੇਜ਼ਬਾਨ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਜਾਵੇਦ ਗਿੱਲ ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਿਰਜ਼ਾ ਸਰਫਰਾਜ਼ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡਾ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਥ 2 ਵਜੇ ਤੱਕ ਰਹੇਗਾ
ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਮਾਸ਼ਾਅੱਲਾ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਰੋਜ਼ਾ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਜੀ ਅੱਜ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ
ਅੱਜ 27 ਤਾਰੀਖ ਹੈ ਜੀ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਦੀ
27 ਤਾਰੀਖ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਦੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਖੈਰੀਅਤ ਨਾਲ ਹੋ ਠੀਕ ਠਾਕ ਹੋ
ਜੀ ਅਲਹਮਦੁਲਿਲਾ ਮਿਰਜ਼ਾ
ਸਾਹਿਬ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ
ਮੈਂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕਈ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਵੋਲੰਟੀਅਰ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਔਰ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕਈ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੇਰਾ ਤਜਰਬਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਇਆ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦਾ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਸਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਿਊਸਰ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਪੇਸ਼ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਸੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟਰ ਵੀ ਰਿਹਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ FM ਜਾਂ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਇੱਕ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਮਕਸਦ ਸੀ ਔਰ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਦੇ ਮਹੀਨੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਮਾਲੂਮਾਤ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਜਾਣ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਤਰਬੀਅਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾਵੇ ਔਰ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਤੋਂ ਸਹੀ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਿਰਦਾਰ 'ਚ ਮੁਸਤਕਿਲ ਇੱਕ ਤਬਦੀਲੀ ਦਾ ਆਗਾਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ
What we're doing just now is in the area of radio, and what we hope to do is to carry on that, expand that area of radio. For instance, we are hoping, inshallah, within months to have a network, an online radio station running permanently 24 hours a day on the internet. That's a wonderful opportunity. We also want to move across into the area of video. That has become the mainstream even on the internet. So we hope to have an area in the media hub which would cater for skills that are related to that area as well. So what we're looking to empower our youth, particularly in the areas of being able to produce programs, whether they are just for the radio or for television or for online TV with regard to the YouTube channels that I've available just now. So that is a beginning, and there is no limit to what we can do and how far we can move on the area.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अस्सलाम वालेकुम प्यारे सुनने वालियो रेडियो रमजान ग्लासगो ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਮੇਜ਼ਬਾਨ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਜਾਵੇਦ ਗਿੱਲ ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਿਰਜ਼ਾ ਸਰਫਰਾਜ਼ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡਾ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਥ 2 ਵਜੇ ਤੱਕ ਰਹੇਗਾ
ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਮਾਸ਼ਾਅੱਲਾ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਰੋਜ਼ਾ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਜੀ ਅੱਜ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ
ਅੱਜ 27 ਤਾਰੀਖ ਹੈ ਜੀ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਦੀ
27 ਤਾਰੀਖ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਦੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਖੈਰੀਅਤ ਨਾਲ ਹੋ ਠੀਕ ਠਾਕ ਹੋ
ਜੀ ਅਲਹਮਦੁਲਿਲਾ ਮਿਰਜ਼ਾ
ਡਾਕਟਰ
ਸਾਹਿਬ
ਸਾਹਿਬ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ
ਮੈਂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕਈ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਵੋਲੰਟੀਅਰ ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਔਰ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕਈ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੇਰਾ ਤਜਰਬਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਇਆ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦਾ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਸਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਿਊਸਰ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਪੇਸ਼ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਸੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟਰ ਵੀ ਰਿਹਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ FM ਜਾਂ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਇੱਕ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਮਕਸਦ ਸੀ ਔਰ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਦੇ ਮਹੀਨੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਮਾਲੂਮਾਤ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਜਾਣ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਤਰਬੀਅਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾਵੇ ਔਰ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਤੋਂ ਸਹੀ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਿਰਦਾਰ 'ਚ ਮੁਸਤਕਿਲ ਇੱਕ ਤਬਦੀਲੀ ਦਾ ਆਗਾਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ
welcome back to those of you who have been following the first day of the Iqra Book Festival today. We have been enjoying interviews from a range of different authors. Unfortunately, Rabia, due to unforeseen circumstances, is unable to attend today. However, we have rescheduled her in tomorrow at 5:30. So if that was an interview you were waiting for, then please do tune in tomorrow to meet her along with the range of different authors we have waiting for you tomorrow. Please do join us back at 4 p.m. to hear from Peter O'Byrne, and I will see you then.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अस्सलाम वालेकुम प्यारे सुनने वाले रेडियो रमजान ग्लासगो ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਮੇਜ਼ਬਾਨ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਜਾਵੇਦ ਗਿੱਲ ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਿਰਜ਼ਾ ਸਰਫਰਾਜ਼ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡਾ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਥ 2 ਵਜੇ ਤੱਕ ਰਹੇਗਾ
ਅੱਜ ਤਾਂ ਮਾਸ਼ਾਅੱਲਾ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਰੋਜ਼ਾ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਜੀ ਅੱਜ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ
ਅੱਜ 27 ਤਾਰੀਖ ਹੈ ਜੀ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਦੀ
27 ਤਾਰੀਖ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਦੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਖੈਰੀਅਤ ਨਾਲ ਹੋ ਠੀਕ ਠਾਕ ਹੋ
ਜੀ ਅਲਹਮਦੁਲਿਲਾ ਮਿਰਜ਼ਾ
ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ
ਮੈਂ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕਈ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਵॉलंटियर ਕਰ ਰਿਹਾ ਔਰ ਪਿਛਲੇ ਕਈ ਸਾਲਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੇਰਾ ਤਜਰਬਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਇਆ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦਾ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਸਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਿਊਸਰ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਪੇਸ਼ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਸੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟ ਵੀ ਰਿਹਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ FM ਜਾਂ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਇੱਕ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਮਕਸਦ ਸੀ ਔਰ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਦੇ ਮਹੀਨੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਮਾਲੂਮਾਤ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਜਾਣ, ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਤਰਬੀਅਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾਵੇ ਔਰ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਤੋਂ ਸਹੀ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਿਰਦਾਰ 'ਚ ਮੁਸਤਕਿਲ ਇੱਕ ਤਬਦੀਲੀ ਦਾ ਆਗਾਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ।
What we're doing just now is in the area of radio, and what we hope to do is to carry on that, expand that area of radio. For instance, we are hoping, inshallah, within months to have a network on radio station running permanently 24 hours a day on the internet. That's a wonderful opportunity. We also want to move across into the area of video. That has become the mainstream even on the internet. So we hope to have an area in the media hub which would cater for skills that are related to that area as well. So what we're looking to empower our youth, particularly in the areas of being able to produce programs, whether they are just for the radio or for television or for online TV, with regard to the YouTube channels that are available just now. So that is a beginning, and there is no limit to what we can do and how far we can move on this area.
Young people wanting to give their time, where do they go, what do they do? So Radio Ramadan becomes an exciting project for them. They're getting involved. They're obviously improving their employability and kind of their own creative skills. There's lots of areas that young people work in: research, editing, presenting is one that they love, being on there and talking about the different subjects that are important to them. I think we've all grown up with Radio Ramadan, and I was asked to come in and just for a short period to do some admin. And I jumped at the chance because you feel that you want to give back something to the radio station that's given you so much. It's just such an amazing Gava project, the radio station, and you feel really privileged that you're helping somehow to get the broadcast out and you're helping to raise all this money. So it's what's kept me hooked and kept me here. Well, it's been a couple of years because I've been so busy, but I remember very vividly the first time I volunteered at Radio Ramadan, and it's just such a brilliant experience. You come in and I was working at the Miss Meath show, but I was doing Careers Corner, I think. It's amazing the skills you learn when you're editing and you're recording and interviewing people, and people give you time to do these things. And all of a sudden you're interacting with uncles and aunties who you would never have thought of interacting with before. And it's just really a brilliant way to kind of springboard into the community and get to know people who you may have seen in passing, or you will see a lot more from them.
I was a volunteer at Radio Ramadan in my early teens, and it was quite a unique experience, especially for a schoolboy, to be able to edit together current affairs programs, children's programs, even being able to live mix some of the debates. And I'd go into school with a bit of a sense of achievement and be able to talk to my classmates and tell them, look, you can tune on this particular frequency and you can actually hear anywhere in Glasgow the fruits of my labor, the actual work I've been producing. And it was also an opportunity to make those mistakes. It was that you can't make when you're working on an international level, broadcasting to tens of millions of people in a community radio environment. It's a bit more flexible and you can get away with that. So when I look back to Radio Ramadan, I look at it with a sense of thankfulness, a sense of loyalty. And whenever anybody calls me up from Radio Ramadan and asks me, can you help us to get in contact with so-and-so, I'll always try and honor that request, whereas other people may not necessarily get the same sort of treatment.
I hope to take this building as an opportunity to further the work of Young Muslims Glasgow, because currently we're doing open circles on a Friday, and we've got Hillhead High, Hillhead Primary, and Shawlands Academy and Wood Farm Education Centre. But if we can take this building and use it to progress further, we have ideas for projects like the Young Leaders Academy and iSyllabus for teenagers. And if we can take this building and use the resources that it'll give to us to help us further these projects, it would be an amazing thing.
Some Information Scotland does things like training facilities for different group service providers, for schools, and for sometimes the schools come in as well, and we have an exhibition for them to see. So there's different things like that. There are workshops as well, and we'll also provide materials like leaflets and posters for those who want to do something similar. The activities that the ARC would provide as far as the Information in Scotland is concerned would be things like Dawa training, drop-in sessions and copy learnings, possibly extending the facilities of what we already have, and exhibitions and things like this, so that we can accommodate more people, and people who are interested in Islam, and people who, Muslims themselves, who actually feel perhaps a little bit daunted by going to different places. This will be an open doors place.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अस्सलाम वालेकुम प्यारे सुनने वाले रेडियो रमजान ग्लासगो ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਮੇਜ਼ਬਾਨ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਜਾਵੇਦ ਗਿੱਲ ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਿਰਜ਼ਾ ਸਰਫਰਾਜ਼ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡਾ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਥ 2 ਵਜੇ ਤੱਕ ਰਹੇਗਾ
ਅੱਜ ਦਾ ਮਾਸ਼ਾਅੱਲਾ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਰੋਜ਼ਾ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਜੀ ਅੱਜ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ
आज 27 तारीख है जी रमजान मुबारक दी
27 ਤਾਰੀਖ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਦੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਖੈਰੀਅਤ ਨਾਲ ਹੋ ਠੀਕ ਠਾਕ ਹੋ
जी अलहमदुलिल्लाह मिर्जा
ਡਾਕਟਰ
साहब
ਸਾਹਿਬ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ
मैं रेडियो रमजान नाल पिछले कई सालों तो वॉलंटियर कर रहे हैं और पिछले कई सालों ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੇਰਾ ਤਜਰਬਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਇਆ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦਾ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਸਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਿਊਸਰ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਪੇਸ਼ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਸੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟਰ ਵੀ ਰਿਹਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ FM ਜਾਂ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਇੱਕ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਮਕਸਦ ਸੀ ਔਰ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਦੇ ਮਹੀਨੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਮਾਲੂਮਾਤ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਜਾਣ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਤਰਬੀਅਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾਵੇ ਔਰ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਤੋਂ ਸਹੀ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਿਰਦਾਰ 'ਚ ਮੁਸਤਕਿਲ ਇੱਕ ਤਬਦੀਲੀ ਦਾ ਆਗਾਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ
what we're doing just now is in the area of radio, and what we hope to do is to carry on that, expand that area of radio. For instance, we're hoping, inshallah, within months to have a network, online radio station running permanently 24 hours a day on the internet. That's a wonderful opportunity. We also want to move across into the area of video. That has become the mainstream even on the internet. So we hope to have an area in the media hub which would cater for skills that are related to that area as well. So we're looking to empower our youth, particularly in the areas of being able to produce programs, whether they are just for the radio or for television or for online TV, as you know, with regard to the YouTube channels that are available just now. So that is a beginning, and there is no limit to what we can do and how far we can move in that area.
I was a volunteer at Radio Ramadan in my early teens, and it was quite a unique experience, especially for a schoolboy, to be able to edit together current affairs programs, children's programs, even being able to live mix some of the debates. And I'd go into school with a bit of a sense of achievement and be able to talk to my classmates and tell them, look, you can tune on this particular frequency and you can actually hear anywhere in Glasgow the fruits of my labor, the actual work I've been producing. And it was also an opportunity to make those mistakes. It was that you can't make when you're working on an international level, broadcasting to tens of millions of people in a community radio environment. It's a bit more flexible and you can get away with that. So when I look back to Radio Ramadan, I look at it with a sense of thankfulness, a sense of loyalty. And whenever anybody calls me up from Radio Ramadan and asks me, can you help us to get in contact with so-and-so, I'll always try and honor that request, whereas other people may not necessarily get the same sort of treatment.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम अस्सलाम वालेकुम प्यारे सुनने वालियो रेडियो रमजान ग्लासगो ਦੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਮੇਜ਼ਬਾਨ ਡਾਕਟਰ ਜਾਵੇਦ ਗਿੱਲ ਤੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਿਰਜ਼ਾ ਸਰਫਰਾਜ਼ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਨੇ ਤੇ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਚੈਨਲ ਵਿੱਚ ਸਾਡਾ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਥ 2 ਵਜੇ ਤੱਕ ਰਹੇਗਾ
ਅੱਜ ਤਾਂ ਮਾਸ਼ਾਅੱਲਾ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਰੋਜ਼ਾ ਦੱਸਿਆ ਜੀ ਅੱਜ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ
आज 27 तारीख है जी रमजान मुबारक दी
27 ਤਾਰੀਖ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਦੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਖੈਰੀਅਤ ਨਾਲ ਹੋ ਠੀਕ ਠਾਕ ਹੋ
जी अलहमदुलिल्लाह मिर्जा
ਡਾਕਟਰ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਅੱਜ ਦੇ
मैं रेडियो रमजान नाल पिछले कई सालों तो वॉलंटियर कर रहे हैं और पिछले कई सालों ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਮੇਰਾ ਤਜਰਬਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਨਾਲ ਹੋਇਆ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਹ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦਾ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਸਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਡਿਊਸਰ ਹਾਂ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਮੈਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਪੇਸ਼ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਪੈਂਦੀ ਸੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੈਂਟਰ ਵੀ ਰਿਹਾ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਸਾਡੇ ਇੱਥੇ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਕਿਸਮ ਦੇ FM ਜਾਂ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਨੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਇੱਕ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਰੇਡੀਓ ਹੈ ਇਸ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਮਕਸਦ ਸੀ ਔਰ ਉਹ ਇਹ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਦੇ ਮਹੀਨੇ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸਹੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਮਾਲੂਮਾਤ ਦਿੱਤੀਆਂ ਜਾਣ, ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀ ਇਸਲਾਮੀ ਤਰਬੀਅਤ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾਵੇ ਔਰ ਰਮਜ਼ਾਨ ਮੁਬਾਰਕ ਤੋਂ ਸਹੀ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਕਿਰਦਾਰ 'ਚ ਮੁਸਤਕਿਲ ਇੱਕ ਤਬਦੀਲੀ ਦਾ ਆਗਾਜ਼ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇ।
Good afternoon and welcome back to Iqra Book Festival Day 1. Up next, I have the pleasure of introducing Ali Mehdi, who is a doctor who enjoys reading articles, books on history, politics and economics, all the subjects that I avoid. But this is our last interview for the day. And remember, please tune in with us tomorrow as well. And over to Ali Mehdi.
Assalamu alaikum. Good afternoon and welcome to everyone. I have the great privilege of interviewing an award-winning author, Peter Oborne. Peter is a British journalist and broadcaster. He presented The Week at Westminster on Radio 4 for 2 decades. He's the former chief political commentator of the Daily Telegraph. He's worked at The Spectator with Boris Johnson and is the author of The Rise of Political Lying, The Triumph of the Political Class, and The Assault of Truth, Boris Johnson, Donald Trump, and the emergence of new moral barbarism. He writes a political column for the Middle East Eye and a diary column for the Byline Times. Welcome, Peter Oborne, to tell us about your latest book, The Fate of Abraham. And I'd really like to thank you on behalf of the organizers of Iqra Book Festival and all our audience. Welcome, Peter Oborne.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me too.
Peter, I'd like to begin about your book. What was your main motivation for writing this book? You cover it really well in your prologue. Now, I'd like to tell the audience as well that you have covered your book, The Fate of Abraham, in 4 main sections. The first concerning America and Islam, then Britain and Islam, France and Islam, and the current state of affairs. So what was your main motivation for writing this book? And perhaps you might be able to read a passage as well.
Well, it's when I was working as political commentator of The Spectator under, in fact, Boris Johnson was the editor. And it was the time of the Iraq invasion, 9/11, the Iraq invasion, and all of that stuff. And I, as a conservative political writer, I got more and more upset by the coverage of Muslims in Britain and the unbelievable ignorance about Muslim countries abroad. And I was particularly upset by the fabricated reporting and false analysis about Muslims in Britain. And that's what, as I explained at the beginning, I felt that the conservatism, which is what I was, a conservative writer, was turning into neoconservatism, which is not conservative at all. It's a kind of revolutionary doctrine about changing the world, and it's actually the opposite of conservatism, because it doesn't pay attention to due process, telling the truth. It believes in violence and not in getting on together. And I explain a lot of that in this book. But so I set myself out to understand the world, you might say, but to understand Muslims in Britain as well, which you might say is an impertinent thing to do. But I'm going to read out my one quote. So I set out to sort of, I went to the Conservative Party conference, as I did it. It was part of my duty. And I was speaking at I was hosting a Muslim organization. I always did, because I thought they were friendless. And the Conservatives were meant to send along just one MP to speak, one MP. And of course, nobody bothered to turn up. And I was so angered by that, that I got to know the organizers, men they were. And I went to see one of the senior figures. And he said, look, next week or the week after, it's going to happen again. There's going to be the Global Peace and Unity Conference in London. And nobody, it's basically cancelled, i.e. no politician from the mainstream parties, that were Labour, Lib Dems even, or the Conservatives are going to come. So, well, I'm definitely coming in that case. And I went along, and I met so many amazing, fascinating people. I mean, it set me off on so many different journeys. But this is what I write. I describe that event, and I write. Oh, hang on. I set it up. This. I thought it was at the back of my book, but I can't find it. It was basically saying what was going on here. Who were these people? Why weren't they allowed to take part in British society? Why, they weren't. What was explaining? What was explaining what was going on? And that really is a kind of explanation of what my book was about, because the word cancel culture hadn't been invented, but what was going on was that quite a lot of British citizens were not being allowed to play a role in the British public domain. And that's very un-British. Britain is about being fair and everybody can be heard. I didn't like that, the fact that my fellow citizens were being excluded. I can't hear you.
In your book, you write at the very beginning about the Muslim businessman who, at the Conservative Party conference, was explaining that Muslims were hardworking and family-minded, people who wanted to stand on their own feet. You say that he made so much of the paradox that very few Muslims vote Conservative, explaining that there was a legacy of Conservative hostility towards immigration in the post-war era. He argued that this hostility was now history, meaning that Muslims were now a promising Tory target group.
Yeah, that's what a very sensible argument at the time. And it was at an interesting moment when the early years of David Cameron as Conservative leader, when some may remember that David Cameron went and stayed with a Muslim family for a week, and he tried to engage, and Saeed Avasi was given a senior role as party chairperson, and all the rest of that kind of thing. And somehow something happened to David Cameron and the Conservative Party. They got captured. And within a space of a year or two, he started to move on to muscular liberalism, as he called it. They started to devise and explore the prevent strategy. And I have a section on that. And they started to, were part, for instance, on this, of the Trojan horse business, which I have a chapter on, which is the Trojan horse business was really a fabricated attack in between the media, certain British think tanks and intellectuals, and policymakers, i.e. politicians, against a community in East Birmingham. I got to know many of the teachers in that school in Parkfield in East Birmingham, and I tell their story as how they're framed effectively as Islamists who want to take over Birmingham schools, when of course they weren't. That was a fabrication. And even now, to this day, the British press and the politicians refuse to acknowledge this grave injustice. And that is what happened to the Conservative Party. It had this wonderful opportunity, which it seemed to be taken 15 years ago, to engage with British Muslims, and then it turned its back.
So, Peter, my next question really would be that we've set out on the premise that a lot of Muslim values align with the values preached by the Conservative, not the neo-Conservatives, but the Conservative Party, conservative British values. And where might this disconnect be? What motivates then a lack of engagement on both sides? Now, could this be, you've traveled widely and you have engaged widely in the writing of this book with various people in the British Muslim community. And do you believe that the cultural differences, including practices, observances, various abstinences that play a part in Muslims being misunderstood, or is there a deeper political agenda that you believe is being pursued that doesn't bring, if you like, the Muslim community within Britain into the mainstream, particularly into the political discourse, if you like?
Yes, I looked very carefully at this debate. And at the heart of this is, what do we mean by Britishness? Now, what I was brought up to believe as a traditional conservative, that Britishness is a very inclusive idea. It's a very generous idea. And actually, the Gordon Brown, when he was Labour Prime Minister, had a really good bash at it. It means that you can be, you can be Scottish and British, you can be Welsh and British, you can be Black and British, you can be Jewish and British, you can be Muslim and British. You can it is such a lovely idea, Britishness, because it enables you to belong but retain your own identity. Another word for it actually is multiculturalism. That is why I have sections in the book about France and the United States, because they have a different kind of national identity. The French have their idea of laicite, and the Americans have the melting pot idea, but we don't. We've got a much, I think, richer idea. And one of the central arguments in my book is how the neoconservatives, who took over really the Conservative Party in many ways, bringing with them the idea of coercive liberalism, which demands a single national identity, very much along the United States lines, or what Macron is trying to establish in France now, pushed on by the far right, whereby you're not allowed to have your unique customs or your unique ways of thinking and your religious values. Just to finish off that line of thought, actually, I mean, at the heart of conservatism, as set out by its founding father, Edmund Burke, is the idea of religious liberty. I see a lot of what's going on at the moment with the Prevent strategy and others as an attack on religious freedom.
I find that very interesting. I'll come to a question from Nadeem Patti very soon, but you speak about an attack on British freedom or the freedom of religion. Now, it is quite ironic, isn't it? On one hand, you did mention laicite in connection to the French state's attitude to separating state from religion. However, isn't there an irony in that the head of state, King Charles, is actually also the supreme governor of the Church of England? And yet, there is that sort of push towards less religion. So where do you see, how do you sort of view this conflict? Where the government...
I understand. Again, I reflected on this while writing the book. The King Charles is at the head of the Anglican Communion, as it's called, which I belong to. I was brought up as an Anglican, and as a matter of fact, my wife is a Church of England priest. And Anglicanism, she would agree with all of this, I don't think, but the Anglicanism it was a solution to a very difficult political problem and a problem of theological problem, which confronted England as it then was in the 16th century, when you had Catholics threatening to invade, Catholic monarchs, Catholicism internally seen as the enemy of the state, and at the same time you had the kind of extreme Protestants, the Lutherans, the Calvinists, etc. And Anglicanism was kind of invented by Queen Elizabeth I. We've had two great Queen Elizabeths, by the way, Queen Elizabeth I, and she came up with this wonderful. She was a genius, a political genius, our greatest monarch. I mean, we've had our two greatest monarchs are both called Elizabeth. They're both women, and they're incredible. Elizabeth I came up with this wonderful phrase: "We don't look for windows in men's souls. We don't try and tell you what to believe. We allow you, within the constraints of observing the law of the land, to have to pursue the life that you believe in, and that is ultimately the religious settlement. It probably will have to be adjusted by the King Charles III. He's made some suggestions because it seems most unjust, for instance, that only Anglican bishops are in the House of Legislators and not, rabbis or imams or priests, Hindu priests, and so forth. But that is the religious settlement, which is now under fire. Well, it's not institutionally under fire, but secularism has been the dominant mode in public debate, I think it's fair to say, and is very suspicious of religious doctrine.
So again, going back to this question about the disconnect, could it be, now you did very eloquently explain how secularism plays a major role in our society. And there were controversies in the 80s and 90s that did concern the Muslim community. There was a conflict, if you like, of freedom to speech versus the boundaries of disrespect. Yeah. And could it be that in the 1960s, society as a whole moved away from that concept of deference? Could it be that led to what we understand is now freedom of speech, and then the boundaries of respect or disrespect have been blurred? I'm thinking more like in the 80s, one of the things that the Muslim community was confronted with was its association with the unrest, or if you like, there was a huge amount of angst in the Muslim community connected to the Rushdie affair. Yeah, so there obviously was a conflict.
Yeah, there is a conflict. I think there was the secularism is a movement going strong since the 19th century. Go back to Darwin and the scientific revolution and the challenges to the Bible, and that was in the 19th century. And religion, there's been a long religious retreat in Britain, and it's worth and very much religion is now on the defensive. Now, the secularists make, in my view, outlandish claims to be disrespectful of the insights and wisdom which religion has. I'm talking generally about all religions here, not specifically about Islam. This is a really difficult place. For instance, the Charlie Hebdo felt that they could say whatever they liked and portray the prophet in really obscene circumstances. Now, I don't think that is acceptable, and I don't think that's acceptable. That is, by the way, I'm not justifying the terrible murders which occurred as a result at all, but
none can be justified.
They are. What is not acceptable is to be able just to have total license to vilify or attack a sacred, holy figure who means so much. And I think, the free speech mob, which very often I think those arguing for free speech are really arguing for bigotry, and that's paradoxical. The idea of free speech has been abused to justify attacks on, in particular, Muslims, because the idea we do have free speech in our society, untrammeled, is untrue. There are all kinds of restrictions on free speech to do with encouraging violence, causing deep offense, for instance. Holocaust denial is quite rightly outlawed and is a crime, and racism is a crime. anti-Semitism is a crime. All these things should be, and these are and there are all kinds of other constraints on free speech which are policed through the libel courts. So people who claim that is free speech in Britain are partly right. Yes, we do have a bias in favour of it, but there are very heavy constraints on it, and this has become a particular delicate point because attacks on religion fall within free speech, but I see them more as attacks on communities and hate speech in some of the examples we've had.
Fantastic. Thank you, Peter. Now, I think another area that you've covered in great depth is the conflict around the fate of Jerusalem, which has come from it's a question being asked by one of our audience, and it's been covered very deeply. So where do you think the Middle East conflicts play a part in the role of inclusion in British politics for the Muslim community?
Yes, I mean, if you're talking specifically about Israel and Palestine, but obviously there's all kinds of other issues around the rest of the Middle East where Britain has played a huge role, and not, I think, a good role in the construction of the modern Middle East during and in the aftermath of World War I. And in particular, well, there was the carving up of the Middle East, but also there was the Balfour Declaration. Now, which recognized for the first time the idea of a Jewish homeland. Now, there was also in that declaration a recognition, some people may think it wasn't strong enough, but there it was, of the civil rights of Palestinians who were already living there. And I did feel, you mentioned Jerusalem. I thought that the idea which Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, came up with during her leadership campaign, and was echoed, I should say, by Rishi Sunak, of Britain moving our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, was an extraordinary thing to come up with at that moment. The British Foreign Office has long had the position, the British government has long had the position that the status of Jerusalem won't be resolved until part of the kind of final status agreement for the Middle East, when inshallah there will be a peace agreement which lasts. And to jump the gun like that, particularly, I mean, without getting anything in return, it is absolutely barking mad. It removes any idea that Britain could play an impartial role in getting peace in the Middle East. And if you think about what's going on in Jerusalem at the moment, I mean, it's just inflammatory. And so there are so many arguments which I've been addressing and writing about, along with many others in Middle East Eye. I hope you may have seen them. But I mean, Avi Schlein wrote a fantastic piece explaining why it would be the great historian of the region. He wrote an enormously important piece for us. We've had some very important contributions, and actually people inside the Conservative Party who actually understand the area have been expressing their concern, as have leading Muslim clerics, as has the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Cardinal and the Archbishop of Westminster.
Thank you very much, Peter. No, thank you. We've got another question. The question is, do you see that there are any fundamental values, you've traveled widely, fundamental values within the Muslim community that could possibly inhibit a Muslim from occupying a front bench position, let alone becoming prime minister? There's the possibility that a practicing Hindu could be a prime minister of this country.
Yeah, I think Rishi Sunak is very likely to become the next. I hope he does, because I think it would be a disaster if, I don't know if you're allowed to have political opinions in Iqra, but anyway, I think it would be very unfortunate if Boris Johnson became prime minister. I can see no obstacles whatsoever to a practicing Muslim becoming British prime minister. I hope that happens. In fact, I think it's most important that Britain is a multicultural country. We're very lucky to have a large number of important faith groups here, and I can't see any obstacle of any kind to that happening.
So we'll go back a little bit, rewind a little bit. You mentioned Elizabeth I, one of the great Elizabeths that we've had as monarchs of this country. And you very eloquently cover the connection of Islam with this country going back to the 8th century, to the time of Bede, and a deeper involvement of Elizabeth I as well. Could you please elaborate for our audience what you uncovered as part of your investigation and research?
Yes, well, the central argument, maybe I'll find this quote, although I didn't manage to find the others. I tried to prepare myself, is that there is a remarkable continuity between the Islamophobic or anti-Muslim rhetoric, which you can find so widely today in Britain and the United States, with which, of course, we have a common history, and the sort of language which was used more than 1,000 years ago. You know, as I say here, the Venerable Bede is regarded as the father of English history. He is also the father of English propaganda against Islam. Like many later propagandists, Bede condemned Islam without any first-hand knowledge of it and without meeting a single Muslim. And then you can trace, I do trace, the Venerable Bede to Pope Urban II at the Council of Clermont, when he dispatched the First Crusade and was full of most appalling rhetoric. And then I move on to return to the subject of Elizabeth I, to her very warm correspondence with the caliphs in the Ottoman Empire, with whom she, from Suleiman the lawgiver onwards, she had extremely warm relationships and exchanged gifts with them and many members of that court. So it's not always a hostile relationship by any means, and it is notable that both the Queen Elizabeths had wonderful relationships with Islamic states.
Thank you, Peter. Now, we've also had a question about the history of the slave trade and the relationship of the deep involvement that the European colonial powers had in the slave trade. And the question is that, are Muslims justified in the skepticism of people who claim to be a traditional conservative? I suppose it might be worth finding out, exploring what the conservative approach to the slave trade was, because, I mean, conservatism, as you said, is a creation of the 18th century, Edmund Burke's time. So please, if you might have something to say on that, that'd be very good.
Yeah, the first thing to say is that looking at the slave trade, I can't see any difficulty in examining our past crimes. It's all part of coming to grips with history. We got some fantastically positive and wonderful things in our history, the invention of Parliament, and as a journalist, I think early English British newspapers are rather fine, and we set that in motion to some extent. But there is there's also terrible dark stuff in British history. And there's a sort of view in the modern Conservative Party that even to talk about it is somehow a wrong thing to do. Of course, we should talk about it and fully acknowledge that the fact that huge profits and huge fortunes were made by British involvement in the slave trade. I like to add to that Britain played a pretty distinguished role in fighting the slave trade, and we abolished it pretty early on, and that it's fair to acknowledge that as well.
And I think it would be fair to acknowledge that Britain and France alone were not complicit in the slave trade. It was a global trade being practiced across the Middle East, Africa, Europe, everywhere. It was a trade in commodity historically. I think it's only fair to ask that after all this research and fantastic piece of investigative work that you've done, what do you see is the future as things stand, unless any intervention, any positive intervention happens, or for that matter, where do you see all of this going just now? If you like, the fate of the Muslim community moving forward.
Yeah, I'm quite gloomy. Not universally. I think in the United States there are some signs that under Joe Biden, these sort of manic, sort of anti-Muslim conspiracy theories, which flourished under Trump and under actually Obama, I'm afraid, that the word is getting better. But in Britain there are, and then of course we have what's happening today in India, what's happening today in China. It's very dark indeed. On the other hand, in Britain, and in Europe, I think it's quite frightening. We are all waiting on the Shawcross review of the Prevent strategy. Now, Prevent has gone in a wrong direction. Probably it shouldn't exist at all. It has to be completely, it isn't widely understood, and it effectively targets the Muslim population of this country, and particularly young people. And I don't get any sense that William Shawcross has an understanding of that. And all the hints we're getting is that the Shawcross inquiry will actually intensify Prevent, create a new security architecture for British Muslims, which is completely poisonous. And it is a betrayal of the values of the British state, of fairness, decency, and full citizenship for all. I'm prepared. I've done a lot of work trying to work out what they're going to do. I think we would have heard already, but for the intense political instability at Westminster, i.e., so everything's on freeze. But at some stage, the British government is going to announce, the British Home Secretary will announce the Shawcross review.
I mean, amongst all that gloom, where do you see the silver lining from your travels within the Muslim community? Any green shoots emerging that could potentially transcend this gloom?
Oh yeah, all the time. I mean, I just have to constantly meeting brilliant people, entrepreneurs, intellectuals, teachers, doctors. You're a doctor, aren't you, Ali? I mean,
indeed.
Actually, and you'll have seen a Prevent strategy at first hand in that case because of the public sector obligation. And of course, there's immense reason for hope, and a really successful, as generally speaking, it's a really successful phenomenon post-war immigration from the subcontinent largely, but many other places. It's given, it's helped Britain to flourish. What we have to combat is the bigotry and suspicion and racism, actually. I think it's an important point that Islamophobia is possible because it can be presented as anti-religious by critics, when really a lot of the motive is racist. But I mean, there's lots of reasons for hope, but we have to, I think we have to come out and make arguments now. And that's what I try to do. That's why I wrote this book and why I will continue to make an argument against what are effectively bigoted policies by the British government. And the Labour Party doesn't do enough to combat them.
Yes. So I have another question from the audience. As you're probably aware, at the heart of the South Asian community, be it India or Pakistan, cricket is a great leveler, and it is something that is almost equal to religion. So somebody would like to sort of, find out within our audience about if you would like to come back and talk about the Wounded Tigers, a history of cricket in Pakistan at a future book festival.
I'd love, don't worry, you couldn't keep me away. Tomorrow, we've got India v Pakistan, haven't we? In Australia.
I'm not entirely certain. I haven't.
Yeah, it's quite a match. It's the opening match for both countries, I think, in the T20 World Cup, and I'm really kind of looking forward to that. And I know that's a subject very close to my heart. As you know, I've written a book about the history of Pakistan cricket, and it's a subject I love and return to.
So I believe it's on. Somebody reminds me. So, Peter, thank you so much for your time. I'm absolutely grateful that you have found time from the maelstrom that has affected Westminster, where I'm sure there'll be a lot to write about. And this is absolutely a busy time for you. In the sort of, doctor's analogy, it's almost like the hospital is being faced by emergency pressures, ambulances waiting outside. And I suppose in journalistic speak, this would be that sort of time for you, but it's probably happened a bit too often recently. So I'm really, really grateful on behalf of Iqra Book Festival that you've been able to talk to us about the fate of Abraham. And on behalf of everyone in the audience, and Iqra Book Festival, I wish you the very, very best and hope that you're able to come back and speak to us again. Is there one final message that you'd like to give before we close?
Well, no, but I just like to say what fun it's been to talk to you, and please invite me back. And actually, the other thing is that this political crisis, which that is what we are undergoing at the moment, it may be that this is the high watermark of this very unpleasant move of conservatism towards outright bigotry. And I am hoping that the political, constitutional collapse what we are suffering as a nation can allow us to rethink the things which have clearly gone very badly wrong in the last few years, and that we can start to learn to talk to one another again as a nation in a civilized way, without having to smear each other, insult each other, and use the language of hatred so much. And I think that it may be, we don't know which way it's going to go, but maybe this can help us come back to civilized conversation such as the kind that has been going on at this festival.
Thank you so much, Peter. So Peter Oborn, The Fate of Abraham, published by Simon & Schuster, is available for anyone to buy and it was been a thoroughly enjoyable read. And Peter, above all, it's been thoroughly enjoyable and illuminating speaking to you. Thank you very much and wish you the very best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ali Mehdi and Peter Auburn, for that very, very intriguing exchange. Those of you who have been with us all day, thank you very much, and we look forward to welcoming you tomorrow. It's been a pleasure to have you for day one of the Iqra Book Festival. Just a reminder, tomorrow you can join us on the RR365 Facebook page or on the YouTube channel as well. I would like to thank all the authors and all the interviewees for taking out their time to allow an insight into our audience of their world. Just a short message from myself. Remember, books are a uniquely portable magic. So continue reading and inspiring others to do so as well.